Chapter 1362. Just as Feng Wuyao was caressing the two women, Enlin accidentally caught a glimpse of his crotch. Enlin was then astonished to discover that there was no bulge in Feng Wuyao's crotch at all. What did this mean? Enlin fell into deep thought. Enlin felt like it wasn't time yet, so he continued to observe from the shadows. The two women's breathing accelerated, and their faces were flushed as they squirmed on the bed. However, the immortal king still hadn't done anything, which made them feel a little uncomfortable. A quarter of an hour after a series of passionate intercourse, the three of them finally settled down on the bed. During this entire time, Feng Wuyao still hadn't taken off his underwear. The two beautiful concubines were very confused. They couldn't help but feel like something was amiss. So this was what he meant by getting into bed? No, that definitely wasn't the case. This was clearly different from what was written in the pornographic novels. I've already spoiled the two of you. From this day forth, you're both my women. Swear Dao Heart vows that you won't divulge what happened tonight. Feng Wuyao spoke in an indifferent voice. The two concubines immediately swore to keep this a secret. At the same time, they realized that there really was something wrong with this most regal man on the entire continent. After swearing the vows, Feng Wuyao fell asleep with the two beauties in his arms. Enlin's heart was in turmoil as he observed from the shadows. His speculation seemed to have become a reality. He really had discovered the immortal king's earth-shattering secret. He knew that if this secret were to be divulged, the entire world would be in an uproar. That's right, the immortal king who ruled over the entire continent was suspected to be impotent. Enlin was still in shock. He was a Dao integration stage supermighty figure, so he should be able to regrow severed limbs with ease. Even if his penis was amputated, he should be able to regrow it, so why couldn't he? This didn't make any sense. For some reason, he suddenly thought of his own system. Could it be that some kind of force had caused the immortal king to have this kind of physical defect? Enlin was still extremely perplexed. If his dick couldn't be regenerated, then why did he still have a harem of 3,000 concubines? Could it be that there was still feeling from playing like this? No one could answer Enlin's question unless he went to Feng Wuyao himself and asked him, "Brother, your D***ck isn't going to last long, so why do you still have so many harems?" However, even if he did that, it would probably not work. Feng Wuyao most likely wasn't going to give him an honest answer. Instead, he was going to fight him to the death. Just as Enlin was still letting his imagination run wild. Feng Wuyao was resting on his bed, but his eyes suddenly opened, and countless black lotus flowers blossomed in mid-air amid the wails of countless ghostly whales, and sinister winds howled as countless black lotus flowers blossomed in the air. The two concubines lying beside him screamed in fear, and their bodies were swallowed by the black wind in an instant, disappearing without a trace. Enlin's expression changed, and a sense of extreme danger surged in his heart. I was wondering why I kept feeling that something was wrong when I was having fun. Feng Wuyao sat up on his bed. Ka ka ka. The sound of something congealing erupted as black ice crystals materialized in the air around Enlin. Feng Wuyao's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked in the direction that Enlin was hiding in. I didn't think that there would be someone in this world who could hide in front of me. You're not bad. But no one can survive after learning my secret. Enlin's heart jolted. He knew that this wasn't a trick. He really had been discovered. Die. Feng Wuyao made a grabbing motion with his hand. The black ice crystals exploded with destructive frost power. Boom. The earth tremored violently. The power of frost melted the entire sleeping chamber. Feng Wuyao was confident that he could crush a return to void stage exalted immortal with a single attack. All of a sudden, flames as dazzling as the sun tore through Feng Wuyao's power of frost. A ball of flame streaked across the sky like a meteor, streaking across the night sky in the distance. You want to run? Feng Wuya harumphed coldly as he rose into the air and chased after the ball of flames. A faint smile appeared on Enlin's face as he unleashed his great holy flame. He unleashed his Kuan Pring movement technique, upon which his entire body spread its wings and covered a distance of over 150 kilometers. Feng Wuya was astonished. He had never seen anyone as fast as Enlin. This sudden battle had alarmed the entire Immortal King Palace. Countless people turned their eyes toward the ball of flames in the night sky. The ball of flames was far too dazzling. Anyone who looked up into the night sky would immediately be able to see the ball of flames. One cultivator after another flew up into the sky and looked up into the sky. Ripples of battle had already erupted from the Spring Light Palace, and all of the concubines had already turned their eyes toward the inky black sky. "Look, that's the Immortal King, right? My God, who dares to invade the Immortal King Palace and force the Immortal King to step in? He's just seeking death. No one can survive an Immortal King." Just as everyone was discussing fervently, Feng Wuya stood atop a black lotus and caught up to Enlin again before unleashing a palm toward Enlin's body. All of a sudden, space froze over and everything fell silent. All of the immortals could sense a terrifying power erupting forth from the Immortal King's attack. No one dared to face the Immortal King's attack head-on. It was as if they could already envision the dazzling figure being pulverized by the Immortal King's palm. The figure was not fearful in the slightest as he charged toward the Immortal King and unleashed a palm of his own. Boom! Black shards of ice and scorching divine flames exploded at the same time. It was as if the sun had exploded in the night sky, almost blinding all of the spectating immortals. The space within a radius of 5 kilometers crumbled like a cobweb, and gale-force winds swept through the entire Immortal King Palace. What terrifying power! My God, that man didn't die. Gasp. That can't be. That man took an attack from the Immortal King head-on? He's definitely a top-rate, exalted immortal. Enlin had only been knocked back over a kilometer by Feng Wuya, but he remained completely unscathed. All of the old monsters who had resided in the Immortal King Palace opened their eyes and looked toward the battlefield. They knew that this was a powerful being who had suddenly provoked the Immortal King, and he was worthy of their attention. No one knew who that powerful being was, so they were all curious. Except for one person. Yang Lingxian wore a red dress, and she stood on the roof of a building. She looked up at the white-robed man in the night sky, and her cheeks were flushed with excitement as she clenched her fists tightly. It's Enlin. He's Enlin. She had thought that Enlin was only an ordinary exalted immortal. Who would have thought that Enlin's power was already at the top-rate exalted immortal level? Yang Lingxian was initially astonished and elated by Enlin's power, but her expression was soon replaced by concern. Why did he start fighting? Why did he really start fighting? He's so powerful. Why did he provoke the Immortal King? Yang Lingxian was very anxious, but she didn't know how she could help that man. All of a sudden, she recalled what Enlin had told her. He had told her that he was going to fight the so-called Immortal King if he had the chance. At the time, she had been very nonchalant about it. Now it looked like Enlin was going to be serious. Chapter 1363. This was the first time that Enlin and Feng Wuya had clashed, and both of them were astonished. Feng Wuya was astonished. Who would have thought that you would be so powerful? Enlin was astonished. I'm this bad *SS? All the onlookers. Feng Wuya was a bona fide Dao integration stage mighty figure with unfathomable and terrifying might. This was the first time that Enlin had fought a Dao integration stage super mighty figure, and he was already prepared to be severely wounded, but who would have thought that he would remain completely unscathed? It was no wonder that he felt like he was bad *SS. Feng Wuya's expression completely darkened as a gargantuan black lotus materialized beneath his feet before rotating relentlessly, and heaven and earth within a radius of over 50 kilometers became extremely frosty. Yan Ji and Xing Long had already appeared in the air above the Immortal King Palace, and there were 4 other extremely fearsome beings beside them. They were merely standing in the air, but the space around them tremored slightly, as if it was unable to withstand their auras. These 6 were the most powerful beings on the entire continent, the 6 Kunlun divine generals, Xing Long, Guiting, Langya, Du Hua, He God, and Yan Ji. That's the Black Lotus Divine Tao. When the Black Lotus unleashes its divine light, the entire world will obey the Immortal King's command. The Immortal King is getting serious this time, Xing Long said in a cold voice. That exalted immortal who broke into the Immortal King Palace is very powerful. He's about as powerful as us, but he's too arrogant and has no idea how terrifying the Immortal King is. A golden tree person spoke in a husky voice. What a pity. Such a handsome man is going to perish. Humph. Yan Ji rubbed her rosy lips with a wistful expression. At this moment, Lin was struck by an unprecedented sense of pressure from high up in the sky. Is he finally getting serious? Lin stepped forward. Not only did the great holy flame erupt from his body, but the demonic star flame, setting moon flame, heavenly void flame, blood phoenix flame, golden dragon flame, and holy vermilion flame also appeared at the same time. 6 divine flames and 1 holy vermilion flame erupted, as if they were going to incinerate the entire sky. Boundless flames soared into the heavens before hurtling toward Feng Wuya. If it weren't for the protection of the Immortal King Palace's formation, it would most likely have been reduced to a sea of flames. Your flames are not bad, but I call the shots in this world. Feng Wuya stepped forward, and inky black divine light suddenly erupted from the massive black lotus beneath his feet. The divine light was born from the black lotus, and this was Feng Wuya's light of the divine Tao. It swept forth for over 50 kilometers, engulfing all of the flames in an extremely domineering manner before crashing toward Lin. Lin's entire body began to tremble. It was a trembling of excitement. When a true opponent attacked, it was as if every inch of his skin and every cell was itching to fight. The 5 elemental wind, lightning, yin, yang, and yang cultivation techniques had all been integrated into his body, and he had also undergone the golden illusory body refinement and tribulation transcendence. It could be said that his body of the battle god was unprecedentedly powerful. At this moment, Lin needed an extremely powerful enemy to test his strength. Break through! The golden lotus above Lin's head flashed as he launched a fist toward Feng Wuya's light of the divine Tao. His fist crashed down, and the vast power of the earth crashed toward the black lotus divine light with a hint of the essential power of the great Tao. Bam! Heaven and earth seemed to have twisted and warped during this clash. Golden and black energy clashed with one another. All of the spectators could sense the destructive power that erupted from the clash. Even the return to void stage exalted immortals knew that if they were at the epicenter of this clash, they would be annihilated. That was a power that transcended to a whole new level. Lin's fist didn't last for long before it was pulverized by the black lotus divine light, which then crashed into his divine body. All of a sudden, a power that threatened to freeze his blood and seal his consciousness surged toward him, and even his divine body was unable to keep this power at bay. Lin borrowed on the force of this attack to retreat for several kilometers, and blood trickled down the corners of his lips. Yang Lingxian clenched her fists tightly upon seeing this. Hurry up and run. Why are you still fighting? You might be able to escape with your power. In contrast, all of the immortals from the Immortal King Palace were at a complete loss for words. The 6 Kunlun divine generals couldn't believe their eyes. He blocked it? Yan Ji's eyes widened. The Immortal King unleashed the power of the Black Lotus divine Tao, but he was able to block it? Xing Long was also astonished. So powerful. How could there be such a powerful exalted immortal? Divine General Poison Flower, who wore a floral dress and had dark skin, spoke in an extremely intricate voice. A huge wolf with silver fur chuckled coldly. So what? He's still just trash that was sacrificed to the heavens by our immortal king. During the past few thousand years, there have been countless supremely talented, exalted immortals. All of them who dared to challenge the might of the immortal king were slain by the immortal king. Feng Wuya's expression shifted again upon seeing that Enlin was able to block his power of the divine Tao, and he was just about to unleash an even more fearsome spell technique. However, Enlin suddenly yelled, "Stop!" Feng Wuya faltered slightly before a cold smile appeared on his face. "You want to beg for mercy? It's too late. You've offended me, so you must die here today. You have to let me go." Enlin looked at Feng Wuya and yelled, "If you don't let me go, I'm going to tell everyone that you're impotent." Everyone suddenly fell silent. Enlin's voice was quite far away. However, all of the living beings in the Immortal King Palace were extremely powerful, so how could they not have heard him? Even the cultivators in Kunlun City, which wasn't far away from the Immortal King Palace, had heard him. Thus, everyone was astonished as they stared blankly at the two people in the sky. Impotent? Yang Lingqian's mouth gaped open as she wondered if she had heard incorrectly. The Immortal King is impotent? The 6 Kunlun divine generals drew a sharp intake of breath. He was a supreme being who stood high above the masses and ruled over the entire divine source continent. Immortal King Feng Wuya was impotent? All of the immortals in the Immortal King Palace were in a daze. Impossible! This must be slander. Didn't that man say that he would only tell everyone about the Immortal King's impotence if they didn't let him go? Isn't he telling everyone now? Perhaps he didn't even have any hope that the Immortal King would let him go. All of the immortals looked up at the two people in the sky with complex expressions. They had thought that this was going to be an earth-shattering battle, but things were starting to get out of hand. "How dare you slander me?" Feng Wuya's eyes became extremely dark as countless black lotuses blossomed in the air. "You die!" Boom! He unleashed his Tao integration stage power of the divine Tao. Space tremored as the great Tao of heaven and earth resonated. Enlin had been waiting for this moment. He was going to deliver the most lethal blow to his enemies when they were at their most enraged. Chapter 1364. Origin Energy of the Netherworld. An inky black mist revolved around his body. Enlin's aura had risen explosively to the pinnacle of the return to void intermediate stage. Streams of white wind revolved around the evil-slaying sword in his hand, and the inky black blade of the sword became insubstantial and ethereal. He took a step forward and his body disappeared on the spot. It was a movement technique that was even faster than lightning. Lightning was not enough to describe his speed. There was a distance of several kilometers between them, but Enlin appeared before Feng Wuya in the blink of an eye, and his evil-slaying sword stabbed toward Feng Wuya's heart at an extremely terrifying speed. Enlin had no intention of running. All he wanted was an opportunity to kill Feng Wuya. All of the spectating cultivators' hearts jolted with shock and awe at the sight of Enlin's terrifying speed. No one present could keep up with Enlin's speed. Feng Wuya was enraged, but his mind was affected by his rage, and his reactions were a split second too slow. He was unable to block Enlin's sword strike in time, and he could only look on as the blade of the sword descended upon his chest. However, right at this moment, a black lotus suddenly appeared on his chest. The evil-slaying sword struck the black lotus, and it was as if it had struck the hardest object in the world, and the sword was forced to a halt. At this moment, the residual shockwaves from the sword's strike had already torn a trench over 10,000 meters in length into the ground below. Enlin's expression shifted once again. He was clearly not expecting his sword strike to be blocked. Feng Wuya smiled. "My divine Tao is not just the Black Lotus divine Tao, it is also the Heaven and Earth Black Lotus divine Tao. It is born from my heart, but it is manifested by heaven and earth. The heavens want me to live, so what can you do to me?" He was extremely confident. In the divine source continent, He was the embodiment of invincibility. Just like now, he was unable to keep up with Enlin's speed due to his carelessness, but heaven and earth would still materialize an invincible black lotus for him to defend against Enlin's attack. Gotcha! A crisp, cracking sound suddenly erupted. Feng Wuya's pupils contracted slightly. He discovered that the black lotus in front of his chest was showing signs of crumbling in the face of the evil-slaying sword's sudden thrust. He immediately put two of his fingers together, and his divine Tao materialized into a sword that stabbed toward Enlin's heart. Enlin stabbed him with his sword, so he returned the favor with his sword. This sword that was condensed from the divine Tao of the Black Lotus of heaven and earth was superior to any divine weapon, and it could instantly freeze and annihilate all things. Die! A vicious expression appeared on Feng Wuya's face. Heaven and earth froze. Only this sword pierced toward his chest at an extremely terrifying speed. Enlin could feel a boundless chill enveloping his entire body, penetrating deep into his bones. His eyes focused, and wings of wind appeared on his back. He abruptly flapped them, and his body broke through the frozen space before hurtling back several kilometers. At the same time, he held his evil-slaying sword in front of his chest. Feng Wuya's sword projection pierced through space for several kilometers before striking the evil-slaying sword's blade, upon which Enlin's body was sent flying for over 10 kilometers. The Celestial King's attack has been blocked again. God, who is he? The cultivators were all shocked. Just when everyone thought that Enlin was going to continue to retaliate, Enlin suddenly turned around and fled the Immortal King Palace at an extremely fast speed after being blasted back for over 10 kilometers. Don't even think about getting away! Feng Wuya roared as he immediately gave chase. Enlin had unleashed both his origin energy of the netherworld and his wind spirit cultivation method this time, and his speed was on a completely different level compared to when he was fleeing. Feng Wuya's speed was nowhere near his. The distance between the two of them widened. Their tracks disappeared into the night. No one knew what happened after that. However, a few minutes later, Immortal King Feng Wuya returned to the Immortal King Palace with an extremely dark expression on his face. All of the spectating immortals already knew the result. That mysterious exalted immortal had fought the Immortal King and managed to escape in the end. Yang Lingxian stood on the rooftop and gazed into the night sky. She still hadn't recovered from that battle. She had never expected that the exalted immortal, whom she had spent so much time with, who she thought was a braggart and had no heirs at all, was actually a top-notch expert who could fight the continent's #1 expert without dying and escape successfully. So he wasn't just bragging. He really was bad *SS? Yang Lingxian was a little dazed. She thought back to what Dian Dian had done, especially when she had lost control of herself and pounced on Enlin. She then kissed him, and a deep blush appeared on her face. Even though she had offended Enlin didn't get angry, nor did he take advantage of the situation to bully her. He was really like a big brother next door, and it was impossible to tell that he was an extremely powerful being who was close to the level of Immortal King Feng Wuya. So just what kind of person had she gotten acquainted with? Yang Lingxian stared up at the stars in the sky and was unable to sleep for the entire night. The next day, the Immortal King Palace issued an astronomical reward. Anyone who could provide a clue regarding the portrait would receive a reward ranging from 1,000,000 spirit stones to 100 million spirit stones. And that portrait was none other than Enlin's. The battle from the night before had already shaken the entire Kunlun city, so there was no way that news of it could be hidden. Almost everyone knew that a mysterious powerful being had appeared the night before and had been defeated by Immortal King Feng Wuya before successfully escaping. Successfully escaping was not to be underestimated. No one had ever successfully escaped from an immortal king in the past thousands of years, so that was an indication of just how terrifying that mysterious powerful being was. It was also because of that battle that he was referred to as the most powerful being in the world below the Immortal King level. Lin was also bestowed with countless legendary feats. The portrait depicted a graceful, white-robed figure, as well as a set of handsome facial features, which had mesmerized countless cultivators. The man was nameless, but he was given a very romantic title by everyone. He was known as the White-Robed Exalted Immortal. Whether or not he could find the White-Robed Exalted Immortal was another matter, but it was a fact that immortal King Fenghuia had placed a bounty on the White-Robed Exalted Immortal's head. The continent that had become lifeless under Fenghuia's tyrannical rule was suddenly reinvigorated by the appearance of the White-Robed Exalted Immortal. Aside from that, news of the White-Robed Exalted Immortal claiming that immortal King Fenghuia was impotent also began to circulate throughout the city. Regardless of whether this was true or not, this was definitely a tipping point. However, many people didn't believe this to be true. After all, immortal King Fenghuia was renowned throughout the entire continent for his lustful behavior. All of his harem beauties were devastatingly beautiful. How could he be impotent? However, many of the concubines in the Spring Light Palace knew that this was true. All of them had been visited by Fenghuia, so they were naturally aware of this. However, unless they wanted to die, they really didn't dare to discuss this matter. One of the concubines in the Spring Light Palace was currently holding a wanted poster with a warm and enchanting smile on her face, as if she were a lotus flower in full bloom. The night sky is as bright as the sun, and the white-robed exalted immortal is destined to become an immortal. This white-robed exalted immortal has made a name for himself after just one battle. I've finally seen something different in this palace. The concubine leaned against the railing with her hands resting on her cheeks as she looked up into the sky. A wistful smile appeared on her face as she thought back to the figure that had stunned her the night before. Unbeknownst to Fenghuia, there were many concubines in the Spring Light Palace who all had this wanted poster in their hands. All of them were looking up into the sky, and no one knew what they were thinking. Chapter 1365. This was Kunlun City, a super city that had been constructed from the land of an entire empire. On a certain bustling street in this city there was a large dance hall. Beautiful and talented women were singing and dancing here, and cultivators were drinking to their heart's content. Within a private room, a round fatso had just woken up. He picked up the morning newspaper, and his blurry eyes gradually became clear before widening with astonishment. When he saw a man on the wanted poster in the morning newspaper, he slapped the table and stood up with excitement and admiration flashing in his eyes as he exclaimed, "That's awesome! Patriarch, you're so awesome! I had initially planned to come here to gather information and plan things out slowly, but Lin is fighting an immortal king. That's a Dao integration stage super mighty figure. How domineering and invincible!" The fatso chortled with glee. "Wait for me, Master Lin. I'll refine an immortal pill that can completely activate the power of my Dao of alchemy, and I'll follow you through this immortal king palace." At this moment, within the immortal king palace's elder palace, the 6 Kunlun divine generals were Xinglong, Guiting, Langye, Duhua, Hegad, and Yanji. Grand Elder Fu Haotsong, Second Elder Wangqin, and Third Elder Sunbiu. The leader of the immortal king ambassadors, Luo Yen. 10 top-rate exalted immortals were gathered here. Aside from the old monsters who were stationed all over the continent, they represented the most powerful force in the immortal king palace as well as the entire divine source continent. All of them had reached the return to void pinnacle stage and possessed power that struck fear into the hearts of the entire world. At this moment, these 10 mighty figures were all looking at the images displayed on the photographic crystals. These images were none other than the battle between Lin and Fenghuia. They had to understand their enemies in order to better defeat them. They were analyzing Lin's battle in an attempt to find a way to defeat him. After a ferocious analysis, all of the exalted immortals were struck by a sense of despair when they discovered that they couldn't defeat Lin at all. This white-robed exalted immortal's power is far too comprehensive. There are no flaws at all. Yen Ji sighed with disappointment before staring at the man in the image with an entranced expression. Luo Yan's face was dark as he crossed his arms and said coldly, "He specializes in fire arts and sword arts, and his speed is shocking. There is basically no way to deal with him. Before using the secret technique, his strength might be comparable to ours, but once he uses the secret technique, his cultivation base will skyrocket, and he might even be able to fight head-on with an immortal king for a short period of time." Xinglong sighed. "Unless we join forces, we have no hope of winning." Third Elder Sun Biu crossed her arms and puffed out her chest with a cold smile on her face. "Even if we join forces, we won't be able to defeat the white-robed exalted immortal. Do you think you can outrun him?" As soon as he said that, everyone fell into silence. Indeed, a peerless powerhouse that could escape from the hands of an immortal king. Even if they could defeat him together, they wouldn't be able to catch him. Grand Elder Fu Haotsong heaved a resigned sigh. "So be it." Immortal King Feng Wuiao was so enraged that he went into seclusion to cultivate, so we'll have to take responsibility for this. Everyone nodded upon hearing this. At the same time, they knew that this was going to be a long and drawn-out battle. After all, a powerful being like the white-robed exalted immortal could simply hide in a crowd or go into the depths of a forest. Even an immortal king wouldn't be able to find him. Now that he had escaped, he was definitely going to escape from Kunlun City, and the further, the better. The divine source continent was so vast, so it would be like trying to find a needle in a haystack. However, what no one expected was, a handsome man in a black robe arrived at the Immortal King Palace again, and he raised his head with a faint smile on his face. "Immortal King Feng Wuiao, I and Lin am back." Spring Light Palace. Within a triangular building, Yang Lingxian was wearing a red dress, and she was lying on the bed in exhaustion. Her long, jet-black hair draped over her shoulders, and her slender, snowy white calves were faintly discernible under her dress. She stared blankly at the ceiling in a daze, as if she were thinking about many things. Exalted Immortal Enlin had escaped. Would he ever come back again? He would most likely be on the run for a long time. After all, he was no match for Feng Wuiao. The Spring Light Palace was heavily guarded. Was she going to be trapped here forever? What if Immortal King Feng Wuiao chose her? Feng Wuiao was so powerful, what could she do to resist him? Yang Lingxian pursed her lips with fear and indignation on her face. She didn't blame Enlin for abandoning her. After all, Feng Wuiao was extremely powerful, and it would be far too risky for him to return to the Immortal King Palace and take her away. Why would an extremely renowned exalted immortal on the divine source continent risk his life for an ordinary woman? "Hey, why are you always lying on the bed whenever I see you?" A familiar voice suddenly sounded. Yang Lingxian was given a fright, but she repressed the urge to cry out upon hearing that familiar voice. Instead, she turned to her side with an elated expression. Sure enough, there was a man in a black robe looking at her with a warm smile on his face. Exalted Immortal Enlin. Tears welled up in Yang Lingqian's eyes at the sight of that familiar face, and tears began to flow down her cheeks. "Why are you crying as soon as you see me?" Enlin was a little at a loss for what to do. I thought you were never coming back after escaping." Yang Lingxian sat up on the bed and wiped away her tears. Enlin chuckled. "I, Enlin, am a man of my word. I only flex, but I never brag. How could I abandon you?" Yang Lingxian was very touched by Enlin's words, and she nodded vigorously. I believe you now. So everything you said was true." Never would she have thought that Enlin would reappear by her side so quickly. One had to realize that Enlin had just battled the Immortal King 2 days ago. Everyone had thought that he would flee as far away as he could. Who would have thought that he would return to the Immortal King Palace in such a short time during such a sensitive period of time? Exalted Immortal Enlin, thank you for coming back to save me. I'll go with you right now. Yang Lingxian reached out and held onto Enlin's hand. Her cheeks were flushed red, and there was an expression of gratitude and anticipation in her eyes. How could she not be touched when an unparalleled hero descended from the sky and risked his life to save her from the most difficult situation in the world? Go with me? Unlin faltered slightly before coming to a sudden realization. A smile appeared on his face. I won't abandon you, but now is not the time to leave. Huh? Yang Lingqian's body stiffened with confusion. Let me ask you this. Are you touched that I'm saving you now? Unlin asked. Yang Lingqian blushed slightly, and she lowered her head. She didn't dare to look Unlin in the eye as she replied in a soft voice. I'm very touched. Then do you have a good impression of me? Unlin continued. Yang Lingqian's mouth gaped open as if a thought had occurred to her, and her face instantly blushed all the way to the tips of her ears. Yes, I do have a good impression of you, but this is too sudden. Exalted immortal Unlin, if you're like this, I can. Yang Lingqian's heart rate accelerated, and she began to speak incoherently. Unlin clapped his hands together with excitement. That's great. Let's do this. He grabbed onto Yang Lingqian's hand with excitement. I need you to do me a favor. This favor is extremely important to me. I want all 2,000 concubines in the Spring Light Palace to develop a good impression of me. Yang Lingqian. Chapter 1366. Yang Lingqian stared at the man before her with shock and confusion on her face. She suspected that she had misheard, and she asked again. What? I have a mission right now. I need to rescue 2,000 concubines from the Spring Light Palace and make them develop a favorable impression of me. I need your help with this, Unlin said with a serious expression. Yang Lingqian. So she hadn't misheard. Unlin really was this kind of person. That made sense. All men were lustful and dissolute. Yang Lingqian thought to herself with a disconsolate expression. All exalted immortals were revered by billions of people, so it was very normal for them to have many concubines to serve them. But now, even the white-robed exalted immortal was no exception. I still don't understand. Why do you have to choose Feng Wuya's concubines? This is a very risky mission. Can't you create your own harem? Yang Lingqian looked at Unlin with a perplexed expression. Huh? I think you've misunderstood something. I only want to rescue them and give them their freedom, not make them part of my harem, Unlin said with a speechless expression. Yang Lingqian's limpid eyes suddenly lit up. Really? She asked with a hint of elation in her eyes. Then why do you want them to develop a favorable impression of you? You can interpret it as some kind of bad taste. Unlin chuckled and didn't offer any further explanation. This was the system's bad taste. Yang Lingqian turned to Unlin with a reproachful expression. You really are a perverted immortal. Alright, I'll help you with this. Tell me, what do you need me to do? She wore a disdainful expression, but for some reason, she was feeling extremely relaxed in her heart. Unlin replied in a faint voice, That's simple. You just have to do this and this and this and this. Thus, the 2,000-man mission officially began. During the next month or so, one of the new concubines in the Spring Light Palace suddenly became very active. She was Yang Lingqian. Yang Lingqian visited all of the concubines under the guise of spending more time with her sisters. She would also hold some small gatherings and activities from time to time. Due to the fact that immortal King Feng Wuya was in seclusion, he had given his concubines a lot of freedom. Yan Ji and the immortal queen Yan Shuqin were also happy to see the immortal king's harem developing in a more harmonious direction. They only investigated in secret and didn't find anything amiss, so they didn't interfere too much. Some of the high-ranking concubines weren't arrogant to the point of ignoring Yang Lingqian. After all, they still had to keep up appearances. When Yang Lingqian came to visit, they would also smile and greet her before engaging in heart-to-heart conversations. Just like that, Yang Lingqian walked through the entire Spring Light Palace during this period of time. As she made her way around the palace, she would unintentionally bring up a common topic, which was how the concubines had come to the Spring Light Palace, and what their attitudes toward Feng Wuya and the white-robed exalted immortal were like. Worried that the concubines weren't telling the truth? Yang Lingxian had the vermilion bird mirror that Enlin had given her. It was a natural lie detector. If the concubines said that they liked Feng Wuya, and the vermilion bird mirror said that they were lying, then they would become Yang Lingxian's target. Yang Lingxian asked if the white-robed exalted immortal would come to the Spring Light Palace to rescue them. If they said, I hate the white-robed exalted immortal, I'm not going to go with him, and the vermilion bird mirror said that they were lying, then Yang Lingxian would continue to write down their names in her notebook. Most women didn't mean what they said. Furthermore, under the threat of Feng Wuya, they wouldn't dare to tell the truth even if there was no one around. The vermilion bird mirror was a fantastic divine tool at times like this. The vermilion bird mirror would be able to detect any lies anyway, and it would then inform Yang Lingxian in secret. Within the triangular building. Phew! I'm so tired. Please reward me, white-robed exalted immortal. Yang Lingxian lay down on the bed and extended a slender hand with a wide grin. Her red dress spread out on the bed like a blossoming rose, and her dress clung tightly to her exquisite body. She looked at the white-robed man beside her with a hint of anticipation in her eyes. Normal cultivators would think that Yang Lingxian was asking him to eat her, but Enlin knew that wasn't what she wanted. Enlin pulled out a spirit-grade third-rank sun fruit from his storage ring before tossing it to Yang Lingxian. You've worked hard these past few days. This is your reward. It can enhance the purity of your spiritual energy. Yang Lingxian caught the spirit fruit and began to eat it with elation. All of the spirit fruits you gave me are so special. I've never seen any of them on a spirit fruit encyclopedia before. Furthermore, all of the spirit fruits give me a very comfortable feeling, and their energy is also unprecedentedly pure. Yang Lingxian praised as she ate the spirit fruit. These fruits are local specialties from my hometown, so how could they not be delicious? Enlin smiled. Local specialties? Yang Lingxian blinked. Where's your hometown? I'm not telling you. Enlin still didn't want to tell her this. If you don't want to tell me, then don't tell me. I don't want to know anyway. Yang Lingxian pouted a little, but she still finished the spirit fruit. After interacting with Enlin during this period of time, Yang Lingxian was no longer as cautious and respectful as she was in the past. After all, Enlin didn't put on any airs at all. He was extremely casual, and it was very difficult for her to associate him with the white-robed exalted immortal. The way they interacted with each other was becoming more and more like friends. Even Yang Lingxian was quite intrigued by this. She had never thought that she would be able to become friends with someone of this caliber. Perhaps this was the unique charm that exalted immortal Enlin possessed. Enlin had never felt superior just because he possessed a powerful cultivation base. He had never looked down on all living beings as ants. On the contrary, he was very concerned about whether she was tired from her missions and whether she would encounter any dangers. It's been a month, and we've finally completed the first phase of our 2,000-man mission. Yang Lingxian's exhausted expression had been revitalized by the spirit fruit she had eaten. There are 3,520 beauties in the Spring Light Palace. Aside from the concubines with more sensitive identities, I've interacted with a total of 3,200 people, and 2,800 of them have good impressions of you. Enlin was ecstatic upon hearing this. The white-robed exalted immortal was extremely powerful, and even though his combat prowess was the second strongest on the continent, he was still more handsome than Feng Wuya. Furthermore, he was like the wind, and his figure was extremely graceful. Furthermore, he was a legendary figure, and he really was very attractive. Yang Lingxian rolled her eyes at the sight of Enlin's smug expression. There are a total of 2,300 concubines who have been forced into the Spring Light Palace by the Immortal King and are trying to escape from here. As for whether they'll develop a favorable impression of you and follow you without any fear of feng wuya, that's not something that I can predict. Lin nodded upon hearing this. No one could be certain about something like this. Even the people involved probably wouldn't know. That's all right. At the very least, the number of concubines and their psychological inclinations have met the requirements of the mission. Lin was in high spirits. Now, let's begin the second phase of our 2,000-man mission. Chapter 1367. Within the Spring Light Palace, a piece of news was spreading like wildfire. Some of the concubines were in their chambers. Aside from a few concubines who had been intentionally silenced, many of the concubines were discussing among themselves. Hey, have you heard? The white-robed exalted immortal has reappeared. Really? It's only been a month. Does he have a death wish? Apparently, he's going to do something big this time, and he's going to do something big. What is it? He's going to liberate the Spring Light Palace. Gasp. It can't be. How could he dare to do that? How can he do that? Many of the concubines were skeptical, but a seed of doubt had been planted in their hearts. There were over 3,000 concubines in the Spring Light Palace, and 2,300 of them suddenly received a mysterious letter, upon which the words on the letter burned into nothingness. The handwriting was ethereal and elegant, and it was extremely similar to the white-robed man who had been as dazzling as the sun that night. There was only one sentence on the letter. Do you want to leave this place? I'll take you with me. After I take care of business in the Leaping Wolf Mansion, I'll come to the Spring Light Palace to take you with me. Almost all of the concubines' hearts jolted upon seeing this, and a peculiar emotion welled up in their hearts as a faint blush appeared on their faces. The white-robed exalted immortal was coming to save them. They were both excited and perplexed. Was this letter real, or was it a prank? At this moment, in the eastern region of the Divine Source Empire. The former Leaping Wolf Empire was now the Leaping Wolf District of the Divine Source Empire. This was the land where two highly intelligent races, humans and werewolves, resided. The Heavenly Wolf King of the Leaping Wolf Mansion ruled over this land. Even though he resided in the Leaping Wolf Empire, he was not a werewolf. Instead, he was a well-built human with an extremely powerful cultivation base. At the same time, he was publicly acknowledged by all of the cultivators of the Divine Source continent to be the Heavenly Wolf Exalted Immortal, who was one of the most powerful beings on the entire continent. At this moment, the Heavenly Wolf King was enjoying himself in the palace. He sat on a wolf-skin throne with countless female dancers and courtesans serving him. Some of them were offering him precious fruits, some were toasting him, and some were trembling as they knelt to the side. The Heavenly Wolf King laughed heartily as he pointed at one of the kneeling women. It's your turn now. Go and spin that wheel of fate. The woman who was pointed at trembled. Her face turned pale and she stood up shakily. Due to the pressure from the muscular man on the throne, she could only silently walk in front of a large wheel and reach out to spin it. The wheel spun quickly. The courtesans were still singing and the dancers were still dancing. The Heavenly Wolf Demon King looked at the spinning wheel with a smile on his face as he enjoyed the service of his women. Finally, the wheel stopped and the pointer pointed to only two words: severed limb. When the woman who was spinning the wheel saw these two words, her face drained of all color. She was on the verge of tears. Ha ha! It's a severed limb. You're quite lucky. The Heavenly Wolf Demon King applauded with a smile. You're finally alive. The woman turned around, her lips trembling as if she wanted to say something. Suddenly, a bloody mark appeared on her arms and legs, and then they broke. Blood gushed forth, and her 4 limbs were severed. The woman's blood-curdling cries reverberated throughout the entire palace. The Heavenly Wolf Demon King narrowed his eyes as he listened to the courtesans singing and the woman's blood-curdling cries. An expression of extreme enjoyment appeared on his face, as if he was basking in the thrill of abuse. Just as the woman was on the brink of death, a healing technique was cast upon her body. Someone, drag this woman into the pigsty and continue to raise her. The heavenly wolf demon king waved a hand. Next. He looked at the group of women who were trembling in fear and hummed a tune as he pointed at one of them. You. Another green-clothed woman was hit. The woman stood up with despair on her face before making her way toward the wheel and spinning it. She had no choice but to do this as she knew how tragic the consequences of disobeying an order would be. It would truly be a fate worse than death. They had always been the heavenly wolf demon king's playthings, and their fates were already in his hands. They were in complete darkness, and they couldn't see their futures. The wheel spun before stopping. The woman in green looked at the direction that the needle was pointing at, and there was also only one word there: poison decay. No. How could this be? An expression of horror and despair instantly appeared on the woman's face as she shook her head incessantly, as if she had encountered the most terrifying thing in the world. Poison decay was a curse personally administered by a professional poison master of the Leaping Wolf district. The afflicted would suffer the agony of being devoured by a myriad of poisons until their body, bones, and consciousness completely decayed. Only then would the afflicted truly die. This was a fate even more painful than death. No. The woman was on the brink of a mental breakdown as she let loose a cry of despair. She circulated her vital energy with one hand before stabbing it toward her own heart in an attempt to commit suicide. However, right at this moment the space around her suddenly froze. The woman's entire body seemed to have frozen in place, and a look of horror and tears still remained on her face. Tsk, you're quite unlucky. However, you're the one who spun the wheel, so you have no choice but to accept this fate. The heavenly wolf demon king inspected the woman's entire body before a sinister smile appeared on his face. It's a pity that such a beautiful body is about to perish. What do I do? I'm getting even more excited now. The heavenly wolf demon king's smile gradually became twisted. Summon the poison master. A living being in a black robe with black mist emanating from its body slowly drifted over like a specter. This was the #1 poison master of the Leaping Wolf district, and at the same time, it was also an exalted immortal. Its forte lay in inflicting the most terrifying agony upon its victims prior to their deaths. Come, have a taste of pain. The poison master's raspy voice sounded. The woman in green had tears streaming down her face, but she couldn't even move a single finger. All of the women kneeling on the ground turned away as they couldn't bear to watch any longer. This was how this world was. The only order was the rule of the immortal king. Aside from that, power was the only thing that mattered. Without power, one would be nothing but meat on the chopping block. The dark poisonous mist was already drawing closer and closer. The green-robed woman closed her eyes in despair. Right at this moment, a loud explosion suddenly erupted throughout heaven and earth. The poison master's hands faltered as he looked up at the roof of the palace, as if he could see what was happening outside through the roof. The heavenly wolf demon king's expression shifted. How could this be? My palace's enchantment barrier has been broken? Immediately afterward, an extremely terrifying divine sense enshrouded heaven and earth. Both the poison master and the heavenly wolf demon king felt as if they were being looked down upon by a paramount mighty figure. Boom! Divine flames fell from the sky and incinerated the roof of the palace into nothingness. A white-robed man with divine flames enshrouding his entire body stepped through the air, replacing the sun in the sky as the most dazzling being in this world. All of the women kneeling on the ground and the heavenly wolf demon king were reminded of one person upon seeing the figure enshrouded in divine flames. The green-robed woman stared blankly up at the man in the sky. This was the man who had suddenly arrived and brought her boundless hope. The night sky is like a scorching sun, and the white-robed man is destined to become an immortal. He's the white-robed exalted immortal. The heavenly wolf demon king's expression became extremely grave. You're the white-robed exalted immortal? That's right. The man nodded. My Leaping Wolf Palace has never interfered with your affairs. Why are you here? The Heavenly Wolf Demon King roared. And Lin looked at the Heavenly Wolf Demon King. I'm here to CK you up, of course. As soon as he finished speaking, he lifted his hand and slammed it down. Chapter 1368. Lin was a man of few words, and he immediately unleashed his attack. A palm-sized flaming palm whizzed toward the Heavenly Wolf Monarch. It wasn't very large, but it was extremely condensed and imbued with the true intent of his wings of true fire. Even a return to void final stage mighty figure would find it difficult to defend against this attack. Furthermore, the Heavenly Wolf King was only a return to void intermediate stage, exalted immortal. And Lin's simple palm was like a falling meteor, twisting space and incinerating all things. The Heavenly Wolf King was struck by a sense of life or death peril. It's over, the Heavenly Wolf King felt as if the space around him had been sealed, and he wouldn't be able to evade this palm in a short time. At this moment, the Poison Master instantly appeared before the Heavenly Wolf King before pulling out a strange piece of wood, which instantly transformed into a circular shield. This was his life-saving trump card, the Divine Tree Vital Shield, which could defend against attacks from the power of the Divine Tao. Boom! A violent collision erupted. Wood splinters flew through the air as waves of flames swept through the air, knocking down all of the surrounding guards. The Poison Master was shocked to discover that his Divine Tree Vital Shield had been set ablaze. You're using a piece of wood to defend against my flames? How interesting! Lin looked down upon the Heavenly Wolf King with a cold smile. The Poison Master and the Heavenly Wolf King were just about to flee when they discovered that the space around them had been completely sealed, making it impossible for them to escape in a short time. In other words, their lives were now in the hands of Lin. The two of them had once done whatever they wanted to everyone else, but now they were just meat on the chopping block. The Heavenly Wolf King's expression became extremely dark. White-robed exalted immortal, are you not afraid that the immortal king will track you down and kill you? I have no vendetta against you, so why are you trying to kill me? I do indeed have no vendetta against you. Lin stood in the air like a proud heavenly god as he looked down upon the Heavenly Wolf King. But Heavenly Wolf King, you're taking advantage of your good relationship with immortal King Feng Wuya to commit atrocities and commit atrocities. 5 years ago, the White Spring District royal family was unable to provide resources to the immortal King Palace in a timely manner, and they massacred all of the males of the royal family, imprisoned tens of thousands of female servants and concubines of the Leaping Wolf Mansion, and tortured them to death. There are still tens of thousands of women in the Leaping Wolf Mansion who have been tortured. Lin's voice reverberated throughout the world. Everyone in the Leaping Wolf Manor looked up at the man in the sky. All the women kneeling on the ground, whether they were dancers or singers, were also staring at the dazzling man in white. The Heavenly Wolf Demon King's expression changed again. What does what I've done have to do with you? I, the white-robed exalted immortal, hate bullying the weak the most. I want to seek justice for those women who have been persecuted. Lin shouted. You actually risked being discovered by the immortal king to reappear in this world for some insignificant slaves? Are you crazy? It's not worth it. The Heavenly Wolf King looked at Lin as if he were looking at an idiot. Lin spoke with a serious expression. No, it's worth it. They are not insignificant slaves. All of them are more precious than a bastard like you who kills women for pleasure. I'm willing to fight for them. Lin's words were powerful and forceful. Countless women kneeling on the ground had tears streaming down their faces as they looked up at the man who was like the sun. Not only was he enshrouded by divine flames, but also because his words were like sunlight illuminating their entire world. They were members of the White Spring District royal family, and they were already as lowly as dirt, living a life of darkness where no one knew when they would die. But now, this white-robed exalted immortal dared to oppose the most powerful being on this continent and come here to save them. That's all I have to say. Die trash. Unlin raised a single arm, and boundless fire energy converged on his arm as he launched an almighty fist. Heavenly poison devour! The poison master chanted in a low voice as poisonous mist erupted from his body, which transformed into a massive black, corrosive mouth that pounced toward Unlin. Wolf King Blood God Strike! The Heavenly Wolf King let loose an almighty roar as his hands transformed into Heavenly Wolf Crimson Claws, which descended upon Unlin. All of the surrounding cultivators felt as if they had been plunged into hell, and even space itself was being torn apart by this terrifying attack. There was no way out for them now. They could only fight to the death. Unlin's expression remained unchanged as his fist pierced through the air before crashing into the massive black, corrosive mouth, instantly incinerating all of the poisonous mist into nothingness. Before the fist energy arrived, it landed on the Heavenly Wolf Blood Claw. The terrifying force caused the Heavenly Wolf Blood Claw to crack inch by inch. In the end, the fist struck the Poison Master and the Heavenly Wolf King, tearing their bones and flesh apart. Boom! A gargantuan fist imprint appeared on the ground of the palace. Amidst the fist imprints were the mangled bodies of the Poison Master and the Celestial Wolf King. Even though they were still hanging onto their last breaths, they were already on the verge of death. The white-robed exalted immortal had once again demonstrated his invincible combat prowess by defeating the two most powerful beings of the Leaping Wolf district with a single punch. All of the cultivators who had rushed over to provide reinforcements all faltered with astonishment on their faces. There were hundreds of powerful beings, but not a single one of them dared to charge forward. This was a man who could even battle an immortal king. No one wanted to live too long. The Poison Master and the Heavenly Wolf King panted heavily as they lay on the ground, and each and every breath they took caused their wounds to throb with excruciating pain. I've heard that the Poison Master and the Heavenly Wolf King enjoy torturing women to death, and they've invented over 100 different ways to do so. I really can't bear to let you die so easily. Unlin descended from the sky before making his way toward the Poison Master and the Heavenly Wolf King. You didn't think that this day would come, did you? A smile appeared on his face, but his eyes were filled with cold indifference. The Poison Master and the Heavenly Wolf King were struggling to even move, and they looked up at Unlin with resentment and deep horror in their eyes. Unlin glanced at the Wheel of Fate nearby with a smile on his face. How about this? I'll give you a chance as well. You can spin that Wheel of Fate and let it decide your fate. How about that? The Poison Master and the Heavenly Wolf King's eyes lit up upon hearing this. Even though there were over 100 types of torture on the Wheel of Fate, there was still a chance for them to survive. Unlin placed the Wheel of Fate before the Heavenly Wolf King. The Heavenly Wolf King extended a mangled arm and spun the wheel with all his might. Never would they have thought that after torturing over 10,000 women to death with the Wheel of Fate, they would be punished by the Wheel of Fate one day. How ironic was this? The Wheel of Fate quickly spun before slowly coming to a stop. There were only 2 words on the Wheel of Fate, all of them. All of the onlookers drew sharp intakes of breath upon seeing this. Wow, congratulations! You're in luck. Unlin applauded. You'll get to experience over 100 types of torture. No. Impossible. My wheel doesn't have that. The Heavenly Wolf King spoke in a hoarse voice with horror on his face. You're bullying us. The Poison Master wanted to commit suicide. Unlin chuckled coldly. Of course I'm bullying you. On this day, the blood-curdling cries of the Heavenly Wolf King and the Poison Master reverberated throughout the entire palace. The two of them had committed the most heinous crimes, and after being subjected to over 100 types of torture, they finally lost their lives. The white-robed exalted immortal had slain hundreds of palace guards on his own. He had rescued over 20,000 female slaves and concubines. News of this stirred the entire Divine Source continent. Chapter 1369. The deaths of the heavenly wolf demon king and the poison master allowed all of the women who had been oppressed to finally vent their frustrations. 20,000 women were currently in a place isolated from the rest of the world. They all looked at the white-robed man not far away. The man who had given them a new life now looked so dazzling and desirable. However, the man suddenly turned around and asked a very strange question. "Do you have a good impression of me?" All the women were taken aback by his words. The white-robed exalted immortal was a handsome, powerful, and gentle man who fulfilled all of their dreams, so how could they not be attracted to him? The women blushed and nodded, expressing their good impression of him. Some of them were still trying to decipher what the white-robed exalted immortal had just said, and their hearts were racing. Could it be that the white-robed exalted immortal was interested in them? Such a gentle and powerful person, who was also their savior, if he really took a liking to them. Some of them actually didn't have much resistance, however. The white-robed exalted immortal's next words brought them back to reality. "Your escape has offended the immortal king's rule, so you can live here in seclusion for now. I'll leave for a while. After a while, I'll let you obtain true freedom." Unlin said again. "True freedom." These words touched the hearts of the women again. "White-robed exalted immortal, where are you going?" The green-robed woman stepped forward and asked with a worried expression. Unlin turned to look at the women behind him with a smile. "I'm going to save more people, then kill immortal King Feng Wuya and restore order." Her words touched the hearts of the women again. When they looked forward again, the white-robed man was nowhere to be seen. "The white-robed exalted immortal really is a true dragon," a woman said with an entranced expression. "Immortal King Feng Wuya is the only powerful being on this continent who has progressed to a completely new cultivation base. Will the white-robed exalted immortal be able to defeat him?" Don't overthink things. Even if the white-robed exalted immortal can't defeat him, he can still get away. Let's wait for his return. He said that he would come back and set us free, so he will definitely come back. Yes, we believe him. The 20,000 women quickly rekindled their hope and threw themselves into a new life. Back in the Leaping Wolf Mansion, they had already survived the days where they could be tortured to death at any moment. Now, it could be said that they were living a blissful life. What else could they be dissatisfied with? The story of Unlin rescuing 20,000 female slaves and concubines who had been persecuted spread like wildfire across the entire Divine Source continent. It caused a sensation across the entire continent, and it became the topic of conversation for many people. This matter was actually very commendable. Many people were actually very dissatisfied with what the Celestial Wolf King had done. There was no lack of powerful exalted immortals who hated him. However, when they thought of the relationship between the Celestial Wolf King and the Immortal King, they did not dare to make a move. After all, the Celestial King was the sky of this continent. Everything under the sky belonged to the Celestial King. Unless one wanted to die, no one would dare to offend the Celestial King. However, the white-robed exalted immortal had done it, and he had done it to his heart's content. He had tortured the Heavenly Wolf King and the Poison Masters to death. This made countless ambitious people feel extremely happy. The white-robed exalted immortal's words of, "I'm willing to fight for them," spread like wildfire across the entire continent. He received countless admirers and became a true friend of all women on the Divine Source continent. His feats had spread throughout the entire continent, including the Immortal King Palace. Boom! An inky black divine light erupted into the sky from the meteorite mystic area. The sun in the sky abruptly dimmed, and an extremely resentful voice reverberated throughout heaven and earth. "White-robed exalted immortal, how dare you kill my trusted aides and subordinates? I'm going to kill you!" Immediately afterward, the 10 top-rate exalted immortals of the Immortal King Palace set off toward the Leaping Wolf area to track down the white-robed exalted immortal. Immortal King Feng Wuya announced to the entire continent that he was going to challenge the white-robed exalted immortal to the immortal slaying platform in half a month. As long as the white-robed exalted immortal could come, Feng Wuya was willing to stake the entire Divine Source Empire as the victor would rule over the entire Divine Source Empire. The Divine Source continent immediately became quite lively upon hearing this announcement. No, this was an unprecedented event that was going to rock the entire continent. The immortal slaying platform was located on the Heavenly Mountain in the eastern part of Kunlun City. There was a natural heaven and earth formation there, which was imbued with a special law. The law was that the immortal slaying platform could only allow two living beings to enter, and only when one of them died could the other come out. The origins of the immortal slaying platform were already untraceable, but it was the best place for a fair duel. No outsiders could interfere. All of them knew that immortal King Feng Wuya was trying to lure the white-robed exalted immortal out so that he could slay him with absolute power. However, there was no other way. After all, the immortal king wouldn't be able to kill the white-robed exalted immortal anywhere else, as he was simply too fast. Hence, this was the only way. If the white-robed exalted immortal was afraid of the immortal king palace's formation, then he could go to the immortal slaying platform to seek a fair duel. If he won, he would receive supreme power and status. The same thought flashed through everyone's mind. Would the white-robed exalted immortal dare to accept this challenge? Just as the situation in the outside world was becoming more and more turbulent, the Spring Light Palace was also becoming more and more turbulent. Over 2,000 concubines were staring blankly at the blank piece of paper. They knew that there was a line of words there. Do you want to leave this place? I'll take you with me. After I take care of business at the Leaping Wolf Mansion, I'll come to the Spring Light Palace to take you with me. In the beginning, they were only skeptical about the authenticity of the letter, but now they were certain that this was a letter written to them by the white-robed exalted immortal himself. The Leaping Wolf Mansion incident had been orchestrated by the white-robed exalted immortal, and they had already learned of everything from the letter, so this was definitely the white-robed exalted immortal's doing. Thus, the words, "I'll take you with me," began to surface in all of the concubines' hearts. Everyone knew what kind of person the white-robed exalted immortal was. All of them had been forced to come to the Spring Light Palace by the immortal king's forces, and they were willing to serve the immortal king, but how could that be possible? All of the concubines' minds were in turmoil, and some of them were even looking into the distance with lustful eyes, as if they were anticipating something. Immortal Queen, many of the concubines in the Spring Light Palace are acting strangely. Are you really not going to investigate this? A servant in a blue dress asked in an urgent voice. An exquisitely beautiful woman in a white dress was playing a zither and singing an ethereal song. She didn't say anything and merely continued to sing. This was the leader of the Spring Light Palace, Immortal Queen Yen Shuqin. She was a woman who made all of the concubines in the palace feel inferior. Unbeknownst to everyone, there was also a portrait of a man under her zither. Chapter 1370. Immortal King Feng Wuya had already issued his challenge. The entire continent was in turmoil. However, the white-robed exalted immortal didn't publicly state whether or not he would accept the immortal king's challenge. The 10 top-rate exalted immortals of the Immortal King Palace went to the Leaping Wolf Mansion to search for the white-robed exalted immortal for 10 whole days, but they still couldn't find him. They couldn't even find where the 20,000 women had gone. Thus, one could imagine just how perfect the white-robed exalted immortal was. Not only had he left after venting his anger, but he had also truly protected the rights of all of the women who had been persecuted. The world's perception of the white-robed exalted immortal changed once again. At this moment, within a triangular building in the Spring Light Palace, Enlin was sipping tea in a leisurely manner. Yang Lingxian was pouring tea for Enlin with a curious expression on her little face. Exalted immortal Enlin, are you going to Immortal King Feng Wuya's challenge? Enlin chuckled. What? Didn't you always think that fighting Feng Wuya was like throwing an egg against a rock? Why do you think I'm going to throw my life away now? Yang Lingxian pursed her lips awkwardly. I admit that I underestimated you. You do indeed have the power to battle an immortal king. Even though it looks like you can't defeat an immortal king, I have a kind of blind faith in you. Furthermore, you might not believe me, but you're already carrying the hopes of the entire continent on your shoulders. Stop, stop. Unlin extended a hand. I'm not some savior. What I'm going to do is just a very ordinary thing. Is poaching 2,000 of the immortal king's concubines a very ordinary thing? Yang Lingxian asked. Unlin was suddenly at a loss for words, and he could only clear his throat before changing the subject. Now that we have the public's opinion and the foundation of confidence, we can begin the 2,000-man mission. He could naturally kill the immortal king first, then save all of the concubines. However, doing so would make the concubines think that he was only saving them in passing, and that would make them less likable to him. Doing so would be nowhere near as touching as risking his life to save all of the concubines. 2 lines of text suddenly lit up on the blank letters in the hands of all of the concubines. I'm back. Do you want to come with me? I'll take you away from the Spring Light Palace and take you to a paradise, and you can return true freedom to all of you. If you are willing, drop your blood essence onto the blank letters. That's right, Unlin had left a wisp of his divine intent on the letter. The hearts of the concubines who had been in the palace for a long time trembled once more. They looked at the words on the letter with fervent gazes, becoming somewhat excited. Should they choose to stay in the palace and become Feng and Feng Wuya? Feng Not and Lin Chen Feng and Tian Feng and said, King X, King Not and White, Not, the god of Not either, Not King Immortal, Not and Not, one King, Wang Not. During the battle at the Immortal King Palace, the white-robed exalted immortal had already been ingrained into their minds, and the events at the Leaping Wolf Mansion had made him even more vivid and vivid. Which woman didn't fantasize that an unparalleled hero would come to save her from her current predicament atop a rainbow cloud? Now, this fairy tale-like scene was happening to them. Who wouldn't be tempted? Drop after drop of blood dripped onto the snowy white letters like dazzling plum blossoms. Unlin closed his eyes and sat down with his legs crossed to accept the information being transmitted to him. After a long while, he finally opened his eyes with a smile. It's done. 2,160 people have decided to escape from the Spring Light Palace with me. Yang Lingxian rested her chin on her hand and looked at Unlin with a vibrant smile on her face. You're wrong. 2,160 people have decided to escape from the Spring Light Palace with you. Unlin faltered slightly upon hearing this, and he only came to his senses after looking at the alluring woman before him. He nodded awkwardly. You're right. Moments later, all of the women who had dripped their blood onto the letters saw a line of text. Gather at the Spring Light Palace's White Jade Dance Hall at noon in 5 days, and I'll take all of you with me. All of the concubines saw a single keyword. All of you. In other words, aside from her, were there other concubines who were going to escape with the white-robed exalted immortal? That made sense. After all, the white-robed exalted immortal had said that he was going to save all of the women who had been persecuted, so how could she be the only one he was going to save? All of the concubines were even more convinced by the information in the letters, but they were also struck by an indescribable sense of loss. The unparalleled hero had indeed arrived atop a rainbow cloud, but he wasn't taking her with him. Instead, he was taking a bunch of women with him. Sure enough, there was always a difference between a fairy tale and reality. Not long after that, another piece of news swept through the entire continent. The white-robed exalted immortal had accepted Immortal King Feng Wuya's challenge to a one-on-one battle on the immortal slaying platform at noon in 5 days. This news created a massive stir across the entire continent. A massive wave of excitement was beginning to build. Countless people turned toward the heavenly mountain in the eastern part of Kunlun City. One powerful being after another rose into the air and flew toward the legendary immortal slaying platform. None of them wanted to miss out on this epic battle. Within a large dance venue in Kunlun City, Ishi used the power of the veins of the earth in the Kunlun Empire to refine an immortal pill, which he swallowed before tearing open a spatial rift and disappearing on the spot. The 5-day deadline arrived very soon. On the heavenly mountain in the eastern part of Kunlun City, over 1 million powerful beings had gathered here. They were either riding atop powerful ferocious beasts or flying atop all types of magic tools. As long as people raised their heads, they would be able to see streams of light shuttling back and forth in the sky without any signs of stopping. In the past, they would have never seen so many powerful beings in their entire lives. Now that all of the powerful beings of the continent had gathered here, what a grand occasion this was! The heavenly mountain was over 1 million feet tall and extended straight into the heavens. At the pinnacle of the heavens was a naturally formed arena known as the Immortal Slaying Platform. The Immortal Slaying Platform had a radius of 5 kilometers and was enshrouded in a faint blue enchantment barrier that could keep the shockwaves of the battle within it at bay. If it weren't for this natural enchantment barrier, none of the powerful beings on the continent would dare to spectate the battle from up close. Immortal King Feng Wuya was already standing within the enchantment barrier. His black imperial robe flapped in the wind, and his eyes were filled with divine energy. He had clearly reached his peak condition and was waiting to crush his opponent with his most powerful attack. The white-robed exalted immortal hadn't appeared yet, but everyone knew that he had already accepted the challenge, so he wasn't going to go back on his word. This was the pride of a super-powerful being. Over 1 million powerful beings were waiting for the white-robed exalted immortal to appear. Right at this moment, the immortal king's voice transmission talisman suddenly lit up. Feng Wuya's brows furrowed slightly, but he still picked up the voice transmission talisman. "What is it?" Yan Ji's urgent voice sounded from the other side. "Immortal King, you've been cuckolded." Feng Wuya. Chapter 1371. Immortal King, you've been cuckolded. These words came from the voice transmission talisman. Feng Wuya didn't expect Yan Ji to say something like this, and he was completely dumbstruck. Since they didn't use any concealment spells, some of the spectating cultivators were able to hear their conversation. Those people were dumbfounded, and the air suddenly became silent. Do you know what you're saying?" Feng Wuya felt like his head was about to explode. "It's absolutely true. Master Immortal King, please calm down and let me explain." Yan Ji was clearly quite shocked as she continued. "Today, my servants went to inspect the daily lives of all of the concubines, and they discovered that immortal concubine Shinran had disappeared." Feng Wuya's brows furrowed slightly. He felt like there was still a chance for him to salvage the situation. Imperial concubine Xan Ran was a very playful and mischievous person, so she could have gone to another concubine's palace. My maid thought that Shinran had gone to another concubine's room, so she didn't pay much attention to it and continued to inspect the other concubines' lives. However, the maidservant then went to 16 chambers and found that there were only 5 concubines. She finally realized that something was wrong and immediately mobilized all the personnel to search. Feng Wuya's breathing accelerated. "What was the result?" Yan Ji replied. "We searched the bedchambers of 3,520 concubines and the entire Spring Light Palace, and discovered that 2,161 people are missing." Feng Wuya drew a sharp intake of breath, and his body trembled as he looked up into the sky, as if he were struggling to repress his emotions. After a long while, he gritted his teeth and asked, "Did you find anything?" "We've discovered that almost all of the missing concubines' rooms contain news articles about the white-robed exalted immortal. Furthermore, there was a blank white envelope in the rooms of a few concubines that seemed to have been left behind." I asked Grand Elder Fu Haotsong, who is most proficient in divine sense, to investigate the letter, and he discovered that there was a hint of a familiar power left behind in the letter. It was 99% identical to the white-robed exalted immortal's power that night at the Immortal King Palace. In other words, it's very likely that the white-robed exalted immortal was responsible for all of this. So, Lord Immortal King, it's very likely that you've been, Feng Wei roared, shut up! A loud roar shook 100 miles like the wrath of the heavens. The voice transmission talisman was instantly destroyed by Feng Wuya's roar. Over 1 million cultivators from the mainland were dumbfounded. Feng Wuya had already exploded with rage, and he roared into the sky, "Be ****starred. I challenged you to a duel, but you secretly took away most of my concubines. I, Feng Wuya, will never forgive you. The pitch-black divine light soared into the sky and enveloped the world. The expressions of the cultivators changed drastically as they fled into the distance. The divine light was black, but the millions of spectating cultivators seemed to see a monstrous green light. Run! Why are you still standing here? Are you tired of living? But the battle between the Immortal King and the white-robed exalted immortal hasn't commenced yet, has it? Idiot! In such a situation, would the two of them still fight properly here? The white-robed exalted immortal had cuckolded the Immortal King over 2,000 times, and the Immortal King was definitely going to explode. Now that we know about this, do you think the Immortal King would want us to bring this news out? You're saying we might be killed by the Immortal King? Yes. So run. One cultivator after another fled into the distance with no regard for their lives. None of them were idiots, and they knew that it was best to run now. Otherwise, they could become the target of the Immortal King's wrath. Anyone who dares to spread this news must die. Feng Wuya's enraged roar erupted into the heavens. The black divine light transformed into the sharpest and most bloodthirsty arrows that rained down from the heavens, annihilating all living beings in their wake. One cultivator after another perished to the divine Tao arrows. Many of them were powerful beings from the Immortal King Palace who had come to cheer for them. This was an attack that didn't differentiate between friend and foe, and anyone who was unlucky would die. A fatso crushed a divine Tao arrow flying toward him before looking at the enraged man on the immortal slaying platform with astonishment and admiration in his eyes. The founding ancestor of the Tao of Alchemy really is the founding ancestor of the Tao of Alchemy. Both his thoughts and actions are beyond my imagination. I had thought that he would accept the challenge and fight the Immortal King in a dignified manner, and I would be able to support him from the sidelines. But who would have thought that he would lure the Immortal King away from the immortal slaying platform, after which he stole most of the Immortal King's harem? Bad *SS. Truly bad *SS. This fatso was none other than Yi Shi. He was now in complete awe of Enlin and was in awe of Enlin. On the immortal slaying platform, Feng Wuya's eyes were already crimson, and he was on the brink of chi deviation. Yi Shi was shocked. Attack the enemy's heart first. The Pill Dao Patriarch's heart attack technique really did break through the Immortal King's defenses. Not bad at all. He didn't dare to stay any longer, and he began to flee into the distance. Immortal King Feng Wuya was enraged, and he unleashed his divine Tao arrows, killing tens of thousands of cultivators. However, over 900,000 powerful beings still managed to escape from the heavenly mountain. All of the cultivators who were lucky enough to survive began to spread the news with extreme hatred toward the Immortal King. Thus, the entire Divine Source continent knew that the white-robed exalted immortal had cuckolded the Immortal King over 2,000 times. The Immortal King had said that all those who dared to spread the news would die, but he couldn't just kill all of the living beings on this continent, right? News of this created another massive stir across the Divine Source continent. Everyone was shocked by the white-robed exalted immortal's actions. Immortal King Feng Wuya's impotence had already caused quite a stir, and now, Over half of his harem had been taken away by the white-robed exalted immortal. Feng Wuya had already been known by everyone in the past, and now, he was even more so. However, things seemed to be going in a different direction. The people of the world suddenly discovered that the once paramount immortal king didn't seem to be so untouchable after all. He still had a lot of the same frustrations as mortals. For example, he would also become impotent, and he would also be cuckolded. Apparently, on that day, half of the heavenly mountain was sliced in half by the enraged immortal King Feng Wuya. The next day, news of this was released from Kunlun City. The white-robed exalted immortal announced that he would take responsibility for this, and that he had only done this in the name of saving all of the women who had been oppressed. As for the battle, it would be another day. Spring Light Palace. Within the most luxurious palace, Feng Wuya sat on his throne with a thunderous expression. Yan Ji and immortal Queen Yan Shuqin were kneeling on the ground, not daring to make a sound. Tell me, what do you think is going on? Feng Wuya rubbed his fingers together. What could be going on? Wasn't it just because she wasn't charismatic enough that the white-robed exalted immortal was trying to steal her away? Yan Ji thought to herself. Immortal Queen Yan Shuqin lowered her head. All of the 2,161 missing concubines seemed to have been forced into the Spring Light Palace by the immortal king's ambassadors. They didn't enter the palace voluntarily. You think they can just run away after being forced into the palace? That's a slap to my face? Feng Wuya chuckled. Pass down my orders. All of the escaped concubines will have their entire families executed. Yan Shuqin shuddered and she bowed her head. Yes. Chapter 1372. Immortal King Feng Wuya was not a benevolent man to begin with. On the contrary, he was extremely violent and bloodthirsty, so he really was capable of executing the entire family of over 2,000 concubines. Immortal Queen Yan Shuqin could only nod in agreement, but she decided that she had to spread the news before she did this. That way, the family of the concubines would still have a chance to escape. After all, she was quite close to many of the concubines, and she couldn't bear to see the entire family of the concubines being executed. Report. Master, we have an urgent report. Two powerful immortal king envoys hurried over before kneeling to the ground. Feng Wuya raised an eyebrow. What is it? The white-robed exalted immortal has announced in Kunlun City that he wants to challenge you to a battle on the immortal slaying platform in 2 days, and he says that if he doesn't come, then he won't. The immortal king envoy stammered. Nothing? Feng Wuya's expression darkened. If he doesn't come, then he'll be a coward with no d*ck. The immortal king envoy said with cold sweat pouring down his face. Bastard! Flames that could incinerate all things erupted from Feng Wuya's eyes as he roared with rage. The immortal king envoy who had just spoken was instantly reduced to dust by Feng Wuya's roar. The other immortal king envoy who hadn't said anything was trembling uncontrollably as he knelt to the ground. It was the white-robed exalted immortal who had just said that. What had they done wrong? Immortal Queen Yan Shuqin lowered her head and didn't say anything. She knew that the white-robed exalted immortal's challenge had hit the immortal king where it hurt again. He wants to challenge me? What kind of trick is he trying to pull this time? Does he really think I'll fall for it? Huh! Feng Wuya was still roaring with rage as he vented his rage. Yan Shuqin's lips twitched. The immortal king had already fallen for it. The white-robed exalted immortal was trying to goad the immortal king into accepting the challenge. He was trying to provoke the immortal king into accepting the challenge, but he was trying to goad the immortal king into accepting the challenge. As such, there was a very good chance that the immortal king would accept the challenge. If he didn't accept this challenge, the humiliation he would have to endure would be even greater. All he could do now was take this opportunity to kill the white-robed exalted immortal. Only then would he be able to wash away the humiliation he had suffered. No matter what the white-robed exalted immortal had planned, He couldn't refuse this challenge, as this was the best opportunity to kill the white-robed, exalted immortal. Feng Wuya abruptly slapped the throne, and the spirit tool throne was instantly reduced to dust. Summon the 6 Kunlun divine generals. I'm going to kill the white-robed, exalted immortal in 2 days. Yan Shuqin's white dress fluttered like clouds and mist as she stood quietly at the side. As expected, Feng Wuya had decided to challenge the white-robed, exalted immortal to a duel. It looked like he would have to wait until after the duel. While the Celestial King was busy with the duel, they would first release the news and buy time for their loved ones to escape. If the Celestial King won, those people should have already escaped. If the Celestial King lost, then there was no point in escaping. The next day, news spread that immortal King Feng Wuya had accepted the white-robed, exalted immortal's challenge. This matter created another huge stir on the Divine Source continent. Countless onlookers turned their attention to the heavenly mountain again. Are we still going to the duel between the white-robed, exalted immortal and Feng Wuya? It's probably for real this time, so we can't miss it. For safety's sake, let's watch from afar in case the immortal king unleashes his wrath on us. I can't help but feel like the white-robed, exalted immortal is going to try something again. I'm so nervous. Even though it was very dangerous, there were still many fearless, powerful beings who set off toward the immortal slaying platform on the heavenly mountain. Perhaps it was because there were too many powerful beings last time, but there were also over 1 million powerful beings who had gathered here, and the massive summit of the heavenly mountain was still as lively as ever. What was surprising to all of the powerful beings was that the white-robed, exalted immortal was the first to arrive. On the circular immortal slaying platform, the 99 heavenly pillars with dragons engraved on them stood at the edge. The dark yellow ground was paved with a special material, and it appeared to be quite ancient, but it also gave off a sense of primal and desolate aura. A man in a flowing white robe stood at the center of the immortal slaying platform. His white robe fluttered even though there was no wind, and a pair of deep and clear eyes appeared on his handsome face. All of the powerful beings present were struck by a sense of awe and veneration at the sight of this man. There are many powerful beings who have dared to challenge the immortal king, but the white-robed exalted immortal is definitely the most dazzling and the most recognized one in the past 10,000 years. He is like a sun that can illuminate the entire world. Can he win? A beautiful female cultivator clenched her fists tightly as she looked at the man on the immortal slaying platform with concern on her face. He's also the most popular cultivator among women. A male cultivator added with an envious expression. Regardless of whether it was the female itinerant cultivators or the holy maidens and holy maidens from the major sects, all of them were staring at the man on the immortal slaying platform with rapt attention. Beauties had always loved heroes. This was a very apt saying even in the cultivation world. The Divine Source continent had always revered powerful beings, so it was very normal for those with lower cultivation bases to kneel to those with higher cultivation bases. Now, a powerful being comparable to the immortal king, Feng Wuya, had appeared out of nowhere. He was handsome and gentle, and he was willing to fight for the rights of all women. Who wouldn't like an exalted immortal like him? Now, the white-robed exalted immortal was the center of attention. Whether he would appear for a short while like the epiphyllum or be as eternal as the sun would depend on this battle. Many cultivators were looking forward to it, but at the same time, they were extremely nervous. In contrast, the main character of this battle, the white-robed exalted immortal, wasn't all that nervous. Anlin looked in the direction of the immortal king palace with a calm expression. Not long after, a man in a black robe arrived on a black lotus. Whether it was the wind and clouds in the sky, or the flowers and trees on the ground, they all bowed to that man, as if he was the only supreme being in the world. The cultivators subconsciously lowered their heads when they saw the figure. This was the most powerful being on the entire continent, immortal King Feng Wuya. Exalted immortal Anlin, you've finally come to die. Feng Wuya's expression remained calm, and his previous rage was nowhere to be seen. He looked at Enlin as if he were looking at a dead man, and he stepped into the enchantment barrier without any hesitation. Buzz, on the immortal slaying platform, a blue barrier instantly enveloped the entire space. An invisible law began to spread. From this moment forth, the barrier would not open again unless one of them died. A cruel smile finally appeared on immortal King Feng Wuya's face as he stared at Enlin with a scorching light in his eyes. White-robed exalted immortal, do you know how long I've been waiting for this day? Don't worry, I won't kill you so easily. I'm going to make you suffer the most excruciating torture in this world before you die. Enlin stood proudly on the immortal slaying platform with no hint of fear on his face. However, every single cell in his body was trembling from the excitement of being able to fight to his heart's content. Let's cut the crap and begin. Enlin spoke before charging toward Feng Wuya. The most intense battle in the history of the Divine Source continent had finally erupted. Chapter 1373. Enlin was the first to charge forward, and he was like a white shadow flashing past. When he came to his senses again, the golden fist imbued with the power of the earth was already upon his face. Feng Wuya's expression remained unchanged as his right hand swept toward Enlin's fist in a wraith-like manner. Bam! Enlin felt a vast, boundless power spread through his entire body through his arm. This was power in its purest form, but it was power of the Tao integration stage. His mountain-quaking fist was pulverized, and his body flew through the air as if it had been struck by a gargantuan force. Feng Wuya tore through space and gave chase at an extremely fast speed. At the same time, two of his fingers transformed into swords that glowed with inky black divine light before stabbing toward Enlin's heart. In his current state, Enlin was completely unable to evade, and he could only shield his chest with his hand. Feng Wuya's fingers were imbued with the power of the heaven and earth Black Lotus divine Tao. The lotus gave birth to all things, but the Black Lotus could annihilate all things. It instantly broke through Enlin's divine body defenses before stabbing into Enlin's palm. At the same time, Enlin put two of his fingers together, upon which his 6 divine flames and 1 holy flame appeared. He unleashed his Yang-type cultivation method, fire fusion technique, to fuse all of the flames into a burst of flame energy before stabbing toward Feng Wuya's heart. The space around him seemed to be warping and melting in that instant. A disdainful sneer appeared on Feng Wuya's face, and he completely ignored Enlin's attack. Bam! When Enlin's fingers struck Feng Wuya's chest, a black lotus blossomed again to keep Enlin's attack at bay. No matter how terrifying the flame energy imbued within Enlin's fingers was, it was all kept at bay by the Black Lotus. This was Feng Wuya's Heaven and Earth Black Lotus, absolute defense. The Black Lotus was born from Heaven and Earth, and it was imbued with the will of Heaven and Earth. Enlin had just unleashed the origin energy of the Netherworld and the 6 strikes of the War God, but Feng Wuya was still able to keep his attacks at bay. Another burst of excruciating pain erupted from his lower abdomen. Enlin's abdomen was kicked viciously by Feng Wuya, and his body flew back like a cannonball before crashing into the blue enchantment barrier. Many of the spectating cultivators let loose cries of surprise upon seeing this. Some female cultivators were so nervous that they tore the handkerchiefs in their hand. White-robed exalted immortal, the second most powerful being on the Divine Source continent? Feng Wuya made his way toward Enlin with a cold smile on his face. Reckless thing, since you know you're number 2, how dare you provoke me, the number 1? Do you really think that second place is only 1 step away from first place? What a joke. My realm is completely different from yours. To me, it doesn't matter if you're the 2nd, 3rd, or even the 100th. In my eyes, you're all ants. Feng Wuya abruptly stepped forward, and a boundless divine light shook the entire heavens. Even though the immortal slaying platform had already set up a barrier, the sky was still beginning to darken. On the immortal slaying platform, over 10,000 black lotuses bloomed, and one flower petal after another separated from the black lotuses to transform into blades of light, dancing about in the void. Every single one of the petals could kill off an ascendant immortal with unfathomable strength. There were countless deadly petals in the sky. Welcome to my battlefield, the Black Lotus Realm. Feng Wuya splayed his hands open, and his inky black eyes took on the shape of a lotus flower as his aura erupted forth, striking onlookers with a sense of asphyxiation and despair. Feng Wuya flicked a finger, and a black lotus flashed through the air, leaving an extremely ghastly wound on Enlin's cheek. A smile appeared on his face. Do you see that? I'm invincible here, and I can kill an ascendant immortal with a single flower. Regardless of whether it's 10 or 100 return to void stage exalted immortals, I can kill them all with a flick of my finger. Are you ready to be tortured by me and become nutrients for the Black Lotus realm? Enlin's expression remained unchanged, but his skin gradually took on a crimson-golden color. Boundless divine flames enshrouded his body as he activated his fire god mode. His aura began to soar explosively, and it became more and more vast and oppressive. You're finally going to use your mystic technique? I'm going to crush your final hope. Feng Wuya was elated to see Enlin's exploding aura. He knew that this was Enlin's trump card, and he knew that this was Enlin's trump card. Only by crushing Enlin's most powerful trump card would he be able to enjoy torturing Enlin to death. Enlin activated his fire god mode and stretched his body slightly. This was the first time he had used this buff spell technique after progressing to the return to void stage. He could sense that the flame power within his body was highly integrated with his divine body, thereby allowing him to unleash extremely explosive power. At this moment, countless black lotus petals flew through the air. Enlin looked up at the petals, and he felt as if his consciousness were about to be sucked into them. Extreme engulfment power, slicing power, annihilation power. Feng Wuya was right when he said that each of his petals could kill a return to void stage exalted immortal. Bam bam bam! A series of violent collisions erupted. Feng Wuya's brows furrowed. He discovered that as the black lotus petals approached Enlin's divine body, their power of the divine Tao was warped and weakened by the terrifying scorching temperatures, and they were unable to pierce into Enlin's body. Bam! In the next instant, Enlin crashed through countless black lotus petals and arrived before Feng Wuya. The muscles on his arm bulged as boundless flame power converged upon his muscles, and he launched an almighty fist. Eightfold, fire god fist. Boundless flames erupted from Enlin's arm, and it was as if a sun were crashing down upon Feng Wuya. Not only did the flames illuminate the entire Black Lotus realm, but they also lit up the entire sky outside the enchantment barrier, making all of the cultivators feel as if they were looking at a sun that was even more dazzling than the sun in the sky. Feng Wuya's arm was enshrouded in the power of the divine Tao, and he also launched an almighty fist. In that instant, he realized that Enlin's Kirin fire god fists didn't rely primarily on flame power. Instead, it was the extremely fearsome physical strength that was powered by flame power. Boom! Light and darkness clashed and tore at one another. This time, it was Feng Wuya's turn to experience the overwhelming power of Enlin's fist. The power imbued within Enlin's fist had far exceeded his imagination. Even though his body could conjure up lotus flowers to defend against Enlin's attack, he couldn't keep all of the power at bay, and the sound of his bones cracking erupted. Boom! Another violent collision ensued. After the energy dissipated, all of the cultivators on the immortal slaying platform were greeted by the sight of Feng Wuya's disheveled body slumped against the enchantment barrier. Cough! Feng Wuya coughed up a mouthful of blood as he stared at Enlin with confusion in his eyes. Waves of shock surged through the hearts of all of the cultivators upon seeing this. My God! The white-robed, exalted, immortal injured Feng Wuya. I've lived for several thousand years, and this is the first time I've seen an immortal king injured. Powerful. He's way too powerful. Perhaps the white-robed exalted immortal really can. Some of the cultivators were already getting excited, and some of the female cultivators were even on the verge of cheering. Only when a tall building was about to collapse would it know just how many people were looking forward to its downfall. Chapter 1374. Is this what it feels like to be injured? Feng Wuya moved his fractured right hand and wiped the blood from the corners of his lips as a smile appeared on his face. Ha ha! It's been a long time since I've felt something like this. If it weren't for you, I would have almost forgotten what physical pain feels like. A ferocious expression appeared on his face. Feng Wuya stepped forward and charged toward Enlin at an even more terrifying speed. At the same time, his arm turned inky black, and his Lotus Dao true intent proliferated outward. Bam! Feng Wuya and Enlin exchanged another punch. Enlin could clearly sense that Feng Wuya was a lot more powerful than before. And then, Feng Wuya was blasted flying by Enlin again. His body crashed heavily into the enchantment barrier, upon which another violent tremor ran through the air. Feng Wuya chortled with glee before charging toward Enlin again, and throwing another punch at Enlin. Enlin was not afraid of melee combat in his fire god mode, and he immediately engaged in a fist-to-fist battle. A violent collision erupted, and shock waves of energy crashed relentlessly into the enchantment barrier. Immortal King Feng Wuya was blasted flying again before crashing into the enchantment barrier. Immortal King, is this all you've got? Enlin made his way toward Feng Wuya as divine flames enshrouded his body, making him appear as if he were a fire god descending upon this world. If you continue to be so impotent, you're going to be hammered to death by an ant in your eyes, Feng Wuya roared as if Enlin's words had struck a nerve. You're impotent. I'm going to kill you. Enlin. Did I say he was impotent? Feng Wuya made a peculiar hand seal, and a white lotus suddenly appeared before him before slowly rotating. Enlin could sense an extremely holy aura emanating from the white lotus. Feng Wuya spat out a mouthful of blood essence toward the white lotus. Lotus of life and death, first stage, instant life. The white lotus was stained by the blood, and it quickly darkened to become a red lotus with a hint of black within it. A rich aura of death proliferated outward, as if it were trying to strip away all life force. Die! Feng Wuya roared with a ferocious expression. The red lotus with a hint of black in it suddenly disappeared into thin air. Enlin suddenly had a very strange feeling. It was as if the lotus had not disappeared. It seemed to still exist somewhere. That's right, it existed in my heart. An incomparable sense of danger suddenly enveloped his body. He slowly lowered his head and found that his heart was slightly bulging. His indestructible divine body actually cracked. His heart suddenly felt very comfortable, and he wanted to die just like that. Like flowers blooming and wilting, the cycle of life and death, everything was so natural. Enlin's eyes were slightly blurred. A sinister smile appeared on Feng Wuya's face. Die. Just die, bang. Fresh blood exploded like a bloody mist. Enlin's heart suddenly exploded, creating a huge hole. A bloodthirsty black lotus appeared where his heart was, replacing his heart and emitting an extremely demonic light. The sudden turn of events shocked all the onlookers. Ah! How could this be? White-robed, exalted, immortal. One cultivator after another yelled for the white-robed man. A woman in a red dress flew toward the immortal slaying platform with tears in her eyes as she yelled for Enlin's life. Ah! It hurts. Enlin was struck by a sense of excruciating pain, and he clasped his hand over his chest in agony. Boundless agony assaulted his nerves in a frenzy, and he almost fainted. Ha ha! White-robed exalted immortal, this is the lotus of life and death that I unleashed after expending over 100 years of cultivation base. As long as I'm in the Black Lotus realm, I can make the lotus of life and death bloom anywhere, including your heart. A joyful smile finally appeared on Feng Wuya's face at the sight of Enlin's exploding heart. Be a good little boy and become my Black Lotus nourishment. Even a god won't be able to save you now. Enlin knew that Feng Wuya was right. The Black Lotus that had replaced his heart was not only engulfing his life force in a frenzy, but it also possessed an extremely powerful sealing effect that made it impossible for him to unleash any power. In his current state, he could only wait for death. He had been too careless. As expected, no Dao integration stage super mighty figure was weak. All Dao integration stage super mighty figures possessed unfathomable power. For example, Feng Wuya could suddenly unleash a mystic technique that could put Enlin in a perilous situation. Enlin didn't want to unleash his trump card so quickly. He wanted to gauge Feng Wuya's abilities first before using Feng Wuya as a test subject. However, who would have thought that Feng Wuya would suddenly unleash his trump card and blow up his heart? What do I do? What do I do? Enlin extended a trembling hand in an attempt to remove the Black Lotus from his heart. However, the Black Lotus had taken over his heart, and in his weakened state, he didn't even have the power to move the Black Lotus. Was he really going to die here? Enlin's expression was filled with indignation, but he was unable to stop his life force from flowing away, and his features were becoming wrinkled and withered at a rate discernible to the naked eye. Death never took pity on any living being. Only when it truly descended did Enlin realize just how powerless and despairing he was. Right at this moment, a black streak of light suddenly leaped out from behind him. It then stabbed toward Enlin's heart at an extremely fast speed. Whoosh! An extremely sharp blade pierced through the blossoming Black Lotus and pulverized it. What? Feng Wuya's expression shifted drastically. Enlin also stared down at his own chest with incredulity, where an inky black longsword was embedded. Little Xie, a smile appeared on his face as he slowly heaved a sigh of relief and sat down on the ground. A chubby little girl suddenly appeared, and she pulled out her evil slaying sword before turning to Feng Wuya with a cold expression on her face. You almost killed yourself while fighting a rookie Dao integration stage super mighty figure. How embarrassing! A resigned smile appeared on Enlin's face as he pulled out 3 immortal pills from his storage ring before swallowing them all. His heart had almost exploded. Thankfully, he had already reached the 3rd stage of his evergreen technique, thereby granting him the ability to extend his life for a short period of time. Otherwise, that attack just then would have killed him. Enlin meditated off to the side as he activated his evergreen technique in a frenzy, digesting the powerful medicinal effects of the 3 immortal pills and quickly healing his injuries. Who are you? Feng Wuya's expression shifted drastically as he stared at little Xie with astonishment. You're just a country bumpkin who's never even seen a sword spirit. Little Xie wore a disdainful expression. Sword spirit? What's that? Swords have spirits and can materialize? Feng Wuya was astonished. He had seen tools that could speak, but he had never seen a tool that could materialize into a life form. That's right. I'll have to explain this from the spiritual aura of heaven and earth. Little Xie explained to Feng Wuya upon seeing the confusion on his face. Enlin thought to himself, well done. Stalling for time was exactly what he wanted. He immediately took this opportunity to heal his injuries, and his blood became more and more abundant as the embryonic form of a heart began to appear. Immortal King Feng Wuya was no idiot, and he immediately flared up with rage at the sight of Enlin healing his injuries. He ignored little Xie's explanation and pounced toward Enlin. If you want to bully him, you'll have to get past me first. Little Xie positioned herself in front of Enlin with her evil slaying sword before slashing toward Feng Wuya. Chapter 1375. Little Xie was already at the Return to Void Pinnacle stage, and after progressing to a divine tool and attaining a divine tool domain, her power was further enhanced after Enlin progressed to the Return to Void stage. As such, her power had completely transcended beyond the return to Void Pinnacle stage. Get lost! Feng Wuya remained completely unfazed in the face of Little Xie's power, and he tried to crush Little Xie's sword projection with his bare hands, only to be knocked back several hundred meters by her sword technique. Outside the immortal slaying platform, all of the spectating cultivators were already at a complete loss for words. They had thought that the white-robed exalted immortal was going to be defeated, but who would have thought that an unfathomably powerful woman in a black dress would emerge from his sword and turn the tables at this critical moment? Who the hell was this little girl? Can't only 2 people enter the immortal slaying platform? How did that female immortal come in? I heard the little girl say that she's a sword spirit. Sword spirit? The sword spirit could take on a physical form? What's going on? The white-robed, exalted immortal possesses an unfathomable cultivation base. His sword is not something that we can fathom. Just as the experts and cultivators outside the arena were having a heated discussion, immortal King Feng Wuya materialized a holy white lotus in the air again. Little Xie's eyes narrowed slightly. She knew that immortal King Feng Wuya was going to unleash the same lotus of life and death that he had used to kill Lin. She immediately flipped her sword through the air, and her divine tool domain instantly engulfed the immortal slaying platform and encompassed Feng Wuya's Black Lotus realm. In that instant, Feng Wuya lost his sense of heaven and earth and space. Even the immortal slaying platform beneath his feet had been transformed into a void of darkness. His expression changed. Is this an illusion, or, vanquish the heavens and slay all evil, annihilate? Little Xie wielded her evil-slaying sword, and the blade of her sword disappeared into her divine tool domain. However, it was as if she were swinging a sword through the air. A sense of foreboding welled up in Feng Wuya's heart, and he was just about to take evasive measures when the white lotus in front of him began to vanish. A black lotus instantly blossomed on his chest. This was because the heavens and earth had determined that this move could threaten his life. Then, something even more shocking happened. The black lotus in front of him began to crack as if it had received a fatal blow. Kacha bang! The black lotus shattered, and a beautiful flower of blood erupted from Feng Wuya's chest. He looked at the blossoming blood on his chest in disbelief. It was like the deepest nightmare, and he couldn't believe that he was the one who had suffered this injury. Little Xie's features were slightly pale. It was quite clear that she had overexerted herself in order to injure Feng Wuya, but she still managed to maintain her domain. As expected of a Dao integration stage mighty figure, Feng Wuya's Black Lotus divine Dao light enshrouded his entire body, and his shattered chest was healing at a rate discernible to the naked eye. Lotuses were related to the power of life and death, and as a Dao integration stage super mighty figure, he possessed extremely freakish regenerative abilities, so even if his heart was blasted apart, he would still be fine. The second stage of the Lotus of Life and Death, Lotus Body Nurturing. A black lotus suddenly appeared above Feng Wuya's head. The black lotus revolved relentlessly as black liquid flowed down from it, causing his entire body to become inky black and hard. You can't be thinking that I can't see you just because your skin has darkened, right? Little Xie chuckled lightly. Feng Wuya's inky black skin did indeed appear to have disappeared within her domain, but this was Little Xie's domain. She could sense every single particle within this domain, so how could she lose sight of Feng Wuya? It was not an exaggeration to say that she had everything under control. However, she also knew that Feng Wuya's spell techniques weren't that simple. She immediately unleashed another annihilation sword strike toward the man. However, at this moment, Feng Wuya had already sprang into action. He was like a bolt of lightning, and he instantly appeared before Little Xie before gripping the air in his hand to lock onto a certain spot in space. A sinister smile appeared on his face, revealing his pristine white teeth in the darkness. I am now the Heaven and Earth Lotus, and I can communicate with Heaven and Earth. I can finally sense your sword, Feng Wuya's hand was gripping onto something tightly as he launched a fist toward Little Xie's body. Bam! Terrifying power surged for 5 kilometers, tearing at the space within the domain in a frenzy. Little Xie's body was bent into a crooked position by the immense power, and she crashed toward the enchantment barrier. Feng Wuya chortled with glee as a vicious expression appeared on his face, and he pounced toward Little Xie again. Little Xie had expended too much energy, and she had been severely wounded as well, so her aura was already quite unstable. She was unable to continue using her vanquish the heavens and slay all evil technique, so she could only unleash an evil sword technique toward Feng Wuya's chest. To her surprise, the divine tool projection struck Feng Wuya's chest, but it was as if it had struck another divine tool. An extremely sharp screeching sound erupted as sparks flew, but it was unable to cut into Feng Wuya's chest. My entire body has transformed into the absolute defense of the heaven and earth Black Lotus, so how are you going to cut through it? A cruel smile appeared on Feng Wuya's face as he launched another vicious punch toward Little Xie. A resounding boom erupted. Little Xie was blasted back to the edge of the enchantment barrier again. This time, she was unable to even maintain her divine tool domain, and the darkness receded. There were only over 10,000 black lotuses left on the ground, all of which were exuding a sinister light. See that? No matter how many pieces of trash there are, they're just stalling for time. In any case, I'm going to be the only one walking out of the immortal slaying platform in the end. Feng Wuya cracked his neck from side to side. He made his way toward Little Xie as he contemplated how he was going to torture her. Right at this moment, the voice transmission talisman that he had just received lit up. Feng Wuya's brows furrowed slightly. In a battle like this, he shouldn't be wasting time answering voice transmissions. However, this was a voice transmission from Luo Yan, the leader of the Immortal King's envoys. For him to still dare to send a voice transmission at a time like this, it had to be something extremely important. Feng Wuya answered the voice transmission. What is it? Lord Immortal King, something bad has happened. Luo Yan's anxious and flustered voice came over, and there was also the sound of explosions. What happened? Feng Wuya's expression shifted again as a sense of foreboding welled up in his heart. A top-tier powerful being has forced his way into the fallen star mystic realm, and we can't stop him. Luo Yan yelled. That top-tier powerful being is even more powerful than Grand Elder Fu Haotsong. His target is most likely that meteorite. Feng Wuya's mind exploded with a resounding boom. During the last battle, he had come here, and the white-robed exalted immortal had snuck into his harem to steal over 2,000 of his concubines. This time, he had learned his lesson and only agreed to the white-robed exalted immortal's appearance on the immortal slaying platform. The two of them entered the immortal slaying platform, and the battle would only conclude when one of them died. He had thought that this would be a surefire success. However, he didn't think that the white-robed exalted immortal slaying platform would have an accomplice, and his target was his most precious meteorite. Boom! A destructive divine light erupted from his body. Feng Wuya was unable to control himself again, and his rage threatened to collapse the entire sky. White-robed exalted immortal, you piece of sh*t. I'm fighting you, but you're sending someone to invade my home. Chapter 1376. Immortal King Palace. The sound of the explosion resounded throughout the world. Ha ha! Get out of my way! The fatso was invincible, and all of the powerful beings from the Immortal King Palace who stood in his way were reduced to dust. Like a bulldozer, he bulldozed his way to the secret realm of the fallen star. Luo Yan, who was riddled with wounds, roared and charged at Fatty again. Heaven-burning bone-melting claw. His hand transformed into a claw, from which crimson flames imbued with the power of the divine Tao transformed into a dragon claw that was powerful enough to incinerate space itself before crashing down upon the fatso's body. The Tao of alchemy is soft and soft. Fatty shouted loudly, his face not showing the slightest hint of fear. He used his bulging belly to collide with Luo Yan's heaven-burning bone claw. Bang! The heaven-burning bone-melting claw smacked Fatty's stomach, causing it to cave in. Before Luo Yan could even rejoice, an extremely terrifying rebounding force came from the sunken area and surged throughout his entire body. Part of the heaven-burning bone-melting claw's power actually changed direction. Ah! Luo Yan let out a blood-curdling screech as he was struck by the rebounding flame energy. He coughed up a mouthful of blood as he crashed into the meteorite's secret land. The fatty snorted. "You dare to block Grandpa Shi's path?" The intruder was none other than the disciple of the heavenly lord of Tao and virtue, Yi Shi the Enlightened. He and Enlin split up. Enlin was responsible for holding off Feng Wuya, while Yi Shi was responsible for stealing the heavenly Tao fragment. To his surprise, not only did immortal King Feng Wuya attend Enlin's battle, even the 6 Kunlun divine generals had gone to the heavenly mountain. This was a brilliant opportunity, so how could Yi Shi miss it? That black, square-shaped building up ahead should be where the fragment of the heavenly Tao is stored. To think that it's isolated by a Tao integration stage spell formation. Yi Shi harumphed lightly as he brought out a strange wooden plaque from his storage ring. There were divine symbols carved onto the wooden plaque. Fortunately, Master was prepared and gave me this. He was about to throw out the divine talisman. "Stop!" Third Elder Sun Biu let out a clear shout. Her body moved along with her sword, and her posture was like an ice flower. She swung her sword, and an endless cold power spread out, freezing the void within a radius of tens of miles. Yi Shi was struck by a sense of extreme frost power. At this moment, tens of thousands of mountains appeared behind Grand Elder Fu Haotsong, and boundless crushing power crashed down upon Yi Shi. This was a power that could instantly pulverize a return-to-void stage exalted immortal into mincemeat. Second Elder Wang Chen transformed into a black shadow and quickly approached Yi Shi with a dagger in his hand. Like a venomous viper, he took advantage of the fact that Yi Shi was being suppressed by the 2 elders to deliver a lethal strike. The cooperation between the 3 elders could be said to be extremely perfect. If the average peak-level ascendant immortal were to witness this, they would surely be scared witless. However, Yi Shi was completely unfazed. He slapped his own stomach and yelled, "7 happiness pill, explode the heavens." With that, his stomach suddenly erupted with a dazzling light. From afar, it looked like a giant pill that had just come out of the furnace. Extremely dense pill energy transformed into a substantial force that continuously attacked Gongsun Biu and Fu Haotsong's suppression. Wang Chen was also struck by the power of the pill, and his body abruptly faltered. Yi Shi opened his mouth and abruptly blasted 7 shimmering golden energy pills toward the powerful beings around him. These pills were imbued with the power of pills that he had refined for who knew how long. Yi Shi had attained Tao through pill refinement and pill consumption. Not only could the pills he consumed make him more powerful, but they could also be refined by his body and spat out again. This was his divine Tao. The golden pills pierced through everything and flew toward the 3 elders. 7 happiness pill, explode the heavens, explode. Yi Shi roared, and it was as if 7 suns had suddenly risen within the immortal king palace. Boom, 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 boom. In an instant, an earth-shattering explosion occurred. Heaven and earth changed color as boundless golden energy swept forth and destroyed the entire immortal king palace. This was the power of an exploding pill. Even looking at it from several hundred kilometers away, it was so dazzling and terrifying that it struck fear into the hearts of onlookers. It was as if the entire heaven and earth were about to be flipped upside down. After the explosion subsided, Fu Haotsong and Sun Biu were already half kneeling on the ground with blood all over their bodies, and some parts of their bodies had been charred black. Second Elder Wang Chen was in the most miserable state. He had been struck by 3 happiness pills in a row, and he was lying on the ground in a half-dead state, having completely lost the ability to fight. "Tsk, tsk, tsk, I told you not to stop me, but you just wouldn't listen. You have to realize that I'm the Lord Shi who defeated 9 mighty figures at the Return to Void Pinnacle stage under Nuwa's command." Ishi didn't even look at them as he strode toward the meteorite mystic area. "What do we do? He's too powerful, and we can't stop him." Sun Bu wiped the blood from the corners of her lips with a panicked expression. "It'll be fine." Grand Elder Fu Haotsong, on the other hand, was extremely calm. The Meteorite Mystic Grounds Grand Array is the strongest Grand Array in the entire continent, meticulously laid out by us immortal kings. Even if the 6 god generals of Kunlun were to fight here for an entire day and night, they still wouldn't be able to break it. That fatty wants to break it in a short period of time? All we have to do is wait for the immortal king to kill the white-robed exalted immortal, and he'll lose. Ishi ignored the Grand Elder's words and made his way toward the formation. "Formation Crushing Talisman, go." He tossed the wooden plaque with the divine talisman inscribed on it toward the Tao Integration Stage formation. An extremely terrifying power instantly erupted from the defensive formation upon contact with the wooden plaque in an attempt to shatter it. However, the divine talisman inscribed on the wooden plaque lit up in that instant. At the same time, a vast and boundless power erupted from it. It was born from chaos and could destroy all things in this world. Bam! There was an extremely crisp explosion. A massive hole was blasted into the formation around the meteorite mystic area by the wooden plaque. Just like that, Ishi swaggered into the hole. The Grand Elder's mouth gaped open. The second elder, who was on the brink of death, almost couldn't breathe. The third elder's eyes widened. "This is the number 1 formation under the heavens that you were talking about?" Fu Haotsong. Ishi made his way toward the square building and pushed open the gate. He was greeted by the sight of a gargantuan lotus flower. The lotus flower was constructed from white spirit jade, and it appeared to be extremely beautiful. However, there was nothing on the lotus flower. "That's strange. Where is the heavenly Tao fragment?" Ishi released his divine sense, but he couldn't find any other clues. Meanwhile, on the heavenly mountain over 1,000,000 feet tall, over 1,000,000 cultivators were once again shocked by Enlin's antic. They had thought that the white-robed exalted immortal didn't have any tricks up his sleeves, but it turned out that he still had one up his sleeve. From the looks of it, immortal King Feng Wuya's expression, it appeared that the other person working with the white-robed exalted immortal was extremely powerful. This made them very curious about the identity of this mysterious powerful being. On the immortal slaying platform, Feng Wuya had been enraged to the point of insanity, and he pounced toward little Xie as if he were going to tear her apart. "Die!" Feng Wuya's inky black hands abruptly gripped little Xie's arms. Right at this moment, a figure suddenly appeared in front of little Xie at an extremely fast speed before grabbing onto Feng Wuya's hands in a death grip. "White-robed exalted immortal!" Feng Wuya gritted his teeth. Enlin wore a flowing white robe, and the massive gaping hole in his chest had already been replaced by his fair skin. Divine flames surged around his body, and he had clearly activated his fire god mode. However, aside from his fire god mode, there were also clear differences. A series of dazzling star veins had appeared all over his body, and black infernal energy revolved around his body. An aura that was several times more terrifying than before began to proliferate through the air. Countless stars flashed through Enlin's eyes. "It's over. I'm going to beat you like a dog now." Chapter 1377. Feng Wuya cracked open his mouth, as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. Little Xie immediately took this opportunity to merge back into her evil slaying sword before returning to Enlin's back. Feng Wuya didn't seem to mind as a cold, dangerous light flashed through his eyes. "White-robed exalted immortal, I won't mind killing you again." A cruel smile appeared on his face as he glared at Enlin. He abruptly raised a leg as he spoke before unleashing a vicious kick toward Enlin's waist. under the effects of the lotus of life and death. Feng Wuya's defenses, speed, and power were all at the very pinnacle, and he was virtually invincible. His kick was so fast that no cultivator could follow it with their eyes. And Lin took the attack head-on without taking any evasive measures. Boom! The explosive power caused the entire immortal slaying platform to tremor violently. Feng Wuya felt as if he could hear the bones in his lower leg shattering. A purple starry meridian appeared on Lin's waist, which automatically blocked Feng Wuya's kick. At the same time, the power of the star annihilation surged toward Lin's lower leg. Feng Wuya let loose a wail of anguish, and he tried to retreat in shock, only to discover that his hands had already been immobilized by Lin, and he was unable to struggle free. "I'll give you a kick as well." Lin spoke in a cold voice as the power of the stars gathered beneath his feet. At the same time, a sea of purple starlight appeared beneath his feet, as if it were imbued with a boundless starry sky. Feng Wuya's heart jolted as a boundless sense of impending death surged toward him. Lin had already sprang into action. He was as fast as a shooting star, yet also as ethereal as smoke. Feng Wuya was completely unable to track Lin's true trajectory, and before he could even react, his lower abdomen had already been struck by Lin's kick. His skin, which was imbued with the essence of the black lotus of heaven and earth, caved in from the force of the kick, and a terrifying power passed through his body, pulverizing his internal organs. Crackle, kacha! The sound of ribs cracking erupted at the same time. Pfff! Feng Wuya threw up a mouthful of blood, and his body flew back for over 10 kilometers. Lin crouched down and unleashed his Kuan Ping travel technique, covering the distance of over 10 kilometers in the blink of an eye. He arrived behind Feng Wuya before launching a fist into Feng Wuya's back. Feng Wuya tried to twist his body in midair to evade Lin's fist. At this moment, Lin activated his divine inspection technique, and his fist followed Feng Wuya's trajectory before striking Feng Wuya's back. Feng Wuya's body, which had been flying through the air, was instantly hammered outward amid the sound of his spine shattering. Pfff! Feng Wuya threw up another mouthful of blood. His body was propelled forward by a huge force. In the blink of an eye, Lin rushed in front of him and kicked him into the sky. In the next instant, Lin flew above him and struck his heart with his palm, sending him crashing to the ground. Then, Lin appeared behind him. Immortal King Feng Wuya had finally experienced true despair. He had thought that after attaining the second stage of the lotus of life and death, he would be invincible in terms of speed, power, and defense. However, he didn't think that even retaliating would be a problem. He could only be pummeled relentlessly and throw up blood, as he was completely defeated by the white-robed, exalted immortal. Lin could just barely match Feng Wuya in his Fire God mode. However, after using his Fire God mode, Emperor Ziwei's Core Buff Mystic Technique, Star Vein Divine Technique, and his intermediate rank War God Buff Technique, Origin Energy of the Netherworld, Lin was completely superior to Feng Wuya. He had combined 3 buff mystic techniques and unleashed them at the same time. Not only would this drastically deplete his energy, but it would also inflict severe damage to his body as well. However, in exchange for this, he would receive unprecedented power. This was the power to beat Feng Wuya like a dog. Lin couldn't allow the same tragedy to repeat itself, so he unleashed his full power from the get-go. 3 ultimate bombs. On the immortal slaying platform, Lin's body tore through space and transformed into a series of afterimages. Violent clashes erupted throughout heaven and earth, and the terrifying shockwaves caused the immortal slaying platform's formation to tremor over 100 times per second. In other words, Feng Wuya was being pummeled over 100 times per second. All of the cultivators outside the immortal slaying platform were dumbstruck. It was as if they were watching a miracle, watching this unprecedented duel. The most powerful being on the divine source continent, Feng Wuya, was being pummeled relentlessly. They couldn't even see the two of them as the battle was simply too fast. However, they could clearly hear Feng Wuya's blood-curdling cries. I thought the immortal king had already won, but why is the white-robed exalted immortal so terrifying? Is he still the same white-robed exalted immortal? Could it be that the white-robed exalted immortal has also taken that step and reached the same cultivation base as the immortal king? Otherwise, this doesn't make any sense. I refuse to believe that a return to void stage exalted immortal could be this powerful. Outside the heavenly mountain, the 6 Kunlun divine generals were initially very confident in the immortal king, but they were all completely dumbstruck as they stared blankly at the white-robed exalted immortal pummeling the immortal king. Yang Lingqian's eyes were filled with excitement and infatuation as she stared at the rapidly moving figure on the immortal slaying platform. Even though she couldn't see it clearly, it was still quite mesmerizing. Blood splattered all over the immortal slaying platform. All of that was immortal King Feng Wuya's blood. Bam! An earth-shattering boom erupted. Immortal King Feng Wuya's head was pummeled viciously by Enlin, and his eyes widened as his head almost exploded. Boom! The immortal slaying platform tremored violently. Feng Wuya's body crashed heavily into the immortal slaying platform, and the immortal slaying platform, which had never been damaged in the slightest, was now showing just how terrifying that attack was. To think that you're still alive after being pummeled over 10,000 times. Not taking into account anything else, your life force is pretty strong. Enlin stood in midair before pulling out his evil-slaying sword. If he couldn't be killed, then he would just have to kill him. Wind sword. Enlin's sword fell at an extremely fast speed, aiming directly for Feng Wuya's neck. Feng Wuya's entire body had been pulverized, and he was on the brink of death. He was completely unable to move or evade Enlin's sword strike. Enlin's sword strike had been unleashed after activating his triple buff technique, and it was as if his sword were descending from the heavens with unstoppable might. A black lotus appeared on Feng Wuya's neck. Heaven and earth had determined that Enlin's sword strike was very lethal. The sword blade came into contact with the black lotus, and an earth-engulfing sword might erupted forth. A sharp screeching sound erupted as the might of a divine tool was completely unleashed. Boundless sharpness pierced through Feng Wuya's body, tearing a deep fissure into the ground below. Crack! The black lotus shattered. Feng Wuya's eyes widened with incredulity on his face. The evil-slaying sword had already sliced through the black lotus, and in the next instant, it was already upon his neck. However, at the same time, the blade of the sword was only 0.001 centimeters away from his neck when it suddenly stopped. It was as if there was a thin barrier that kept the attack at bay. Enlin's pupils contracted slightly as a sense of foreboding welled up in his heart. He knew that the evil-slaying sword was unable to slice through Feng Wuya's neck, not because of his defenses. Instead, it was because of an extremely special power. And this power, he felt a sense of déjà vu. Chapter 1378. Just as Enlin was feeling perplexed, Feng Wuya took advantage of this opportunity to launch a counterattack, and he slashed his hand toward Enlin's body. Enlin was able to keep up with Feng Wuya's speed after activating his triple buff technique, and he slashed his evil-slaying sword toward Feng Wuya's neck with one hand while grabbing toward Feng Wuya's hand with the other. Rip! A burst of excruciating pain instantly swept through his entire body. Enlin discovered that his divine body had been easily torn apart by Feng Wuya's hand, leaving a ghastly gash on his arm. This power! Enlin's expression shifted again. Ha ha! Die! At this moment, Feng Wuya unleashed another attack, and he slashed a semi-transparent saber projection through the air. Enlin immediately drew his sword to defend himself, but the terrifying power behind the saber projection sent him flying for several kilometers. Some of the saber projections even pierced through his evil-slaying sword and tore a massive gash into his chest, extending all the way from his shoulder to his waist, and blood splattered onto the ground. Feng Wuya slowly rose to his feet, and a peculiar white light flashed through his eyes as a hint of a smile appeared on his face. It's very hard to understand, isn't it? Anlin's brows furrowed slightly. This power was indeed very hard to understand, but it wasn't as if he hadn't seen it before. I didn't want to use this power here. After all, if I use it recklessly, even my cultivation base will be affected. Feng Wuya looked at Anlin with an indifferent expression as he said, "So what if your other companion has entered the meteorite mystic area? Didn't you see that the 6 Kunlun divine generals have remained outside the immortal slaying platform this entire time?" Anlin faltered slightly upon hearing this before his expression darkened. "That meteorite is in your hands?" "Ha ha. That's right." A victorious smile appeared on Feng Wuya's face. "The meteorite is in my hands. But it can't be called a meteorite. It's a gift from the heavens." Feng Wuya opened his hand. A white crystal-like object that was constantly changing appeared in the center of his palm. The entire world fell silent as soon as it appeared, as if it were the only thing left in this world. It had no fixed shape. Sometimes it was hexagonal, sometimes it was triangular, and sometimes it was circular. It didn't seem to have any substance. Sometimes it condensed into a crystal, and sometimes it became illusory and disappeared like smoke. It was impossible to detect. Outside the immortal slaying platform, over 1 million cultivators were also seeing this thing for the first time. Looks of infatuation and desire appeared on their faces. "What a beautiful crystal! Is this the core of the meteorite from 10,000 years ago? I can finally see the mysterious meteorite. I really want to have it," the cultivators discussed animatedly. The fragment of the heavenly Tao seemed to possess some sort of fatal attraction that caused their gazes to be unable to move away from it, and they were slightly unable to free themselves from it. "Doesn't it look wonderful? Not only did it allow me to comprehend a new realm, but it also allowed me to obtain power that you cannot imagine. I call it the Heart of Heaven." Feng Wuya stared at the object in his hand with an intoxicated expression. "As long as I have this, I am the heavens. I am invincible." Anlin couldn't help but laugh. "Heart of Heaven? You really know how to name things. However, I've killed many people like you who think they're invincible." "Impudent!" Feng Wuya let loose an enraged roar, and the heavenly Tao fragment fused into his body again before launching an almighty fist toward Anlin. The fist projection fused with heaven and earth, and it was imbued with a burst of boundless divine might. Anlin slashed his sword toward the fist projection, but his sword projection was instantly shattered by the fist projection. "Ha ha! As long as I inject my will into my attacks, the Heart of Heaven will be able to manifest my will into reality. You won't be able to stop it." Feng Wuya chortled with glee as he glowered at Anlin with a ferocious expression. Anlin raised his sword in front of him, and the fist landed on the evil-slaying sword. However, the fist passed through the evil-slaying sword and struck Anlin's chest, causing it to cave in. Pff! Anlin couldn't help but throw up a mouthful of blood, and his body swayed slightly, but he still just barely managed to steady himself. Your body wasn't punctured?" Feng Wuya was a little surprised. He had originally thought that his fists could break through anything, and that he could even punch a large hole in his opponent's body in one breath. Anlin panted heavily as he looked at Feng Wuya, and a smile suddenly appeared on his face. "What are you smiling about?" Feng Wuya's expression darkened. "A barrier that can defend against all powers, an absolute power that can pierce through all things. It's like the laws of heaven and earth, the laws of heaven and earth, and everything must operate according to its predetermined trajectory. The heavenly Tao fragment has granted you the power of the laws of the heavenly Tao." Anlin nodded. "No wonder you say you're invincible. Compared to the vast majority of mighty figures, you are indeed invincible. But do you know what? Your power is borrowed. Unlin splayed open his palm, upon which rainbow-like lightning danced joyfully, as if it were singing a song of life, and there seemed to be an unfathomable might imbued within it. And my power is the foundation. What the hell are you talking about? Feng Wuya's expression darkened even further. He felt like Enlin's words were a little out of his league. Enlin didn't say anything. Instead, he thrust his palm toward Feng Wuya. The rainbow bolt of lightning tore through space before hurtling toward Feng Wuya's chest with dazzling divine might. Feng Wuya didn't take evasive measures upon seeing this. Instead, he looked at Enlin with a cold expression. Foolish ant, do you still not understand? I've activated the power of the heart of the heavens, and no one can harm me now. Boom! Lightning roared like divine lightning. The lightning bolt instantly pierced through Feng Wuya's chest and punctured his heart. A massive hole had appeared in his chest, and the area around it was charred black with wisps of white smoke rising from it, as if it was a manifestation of the terrifying power it had just unleashed. Feng Wuya's mouth gaped open as he stared blankly at his own chest with astonishment and befuddlement on his face. Didn't he say that no one could harm him? How had it been punctured? Why? Feng Wuya stared at Enlin as his body swayed unsteadily. Enlin spoke in a cold voice. You're only using the residual power of laws of the fragment of the heavenly Tao, and you're merely borrowing it. However, I possess the power of the heavenly Tao. Crackle boom! Countless bolts of golden void lightning erupted from Enlin's body before revolving around his body to form a golden void lightning robe. Enlin's eyes flashed with lightning, and the paramount might of lightning fell from the heavens before crashing down upon his body. The boundless might emanating from his body made all of the onlookers feel as if they didn't even dare to breathe heavily. A bolt of golden void lightning fell from the sky, shattering space and puncturing even the enchantment barrier around the immortal slaying platform before transforming into a golden lightning sword that was as dazzling as the sun. There was only one color left between heaven and earth, and that was boundless golden void light. All of the cultivators, including Feng Wuya, were struck by the same thought. The man in the lightning robe wielding the golden void lightning sword. He didn't belong to the mortal world. He was a god from above the heavens. Chapter 1379. Feng Wuya was stunned by Enlin's appearance. His godlike appearance was deeply engraved into his mind. Even the immortal slaying platform, which was imbued with the power of laws, had been shattered by a bolt of lightning. How could he not be scared? Who are you? Feng Wuya's body trembled uncontrollably, but he still forced himself to speak. Who am I? Enlin blinked before pointing his golden void lightning sword at Feng Wuya. So be it, I'll let you know what I'm talking about. Listen up, I am the heavenly lightning god who controls lightning between heaven and earth, Enlin. The heavenly lightning god? Feng Wuya murmured. Crackle! Lightning flashed. Enlin's body instantly disappeared, and in the next instant, he appeared right before Feng Wuya before slashing his sword down. Heavenly Heart Explosive Fist. Feng Wuya roared as he launched both fists at once. The power of the heavenly Tao fragment imbued his fists with the destructive will of the heavenly Tao imbued within them as they hurtled toward Enlin. Enlin's sword also fell, and the golden void lightning transformed into the sharpest bolt of lightning, which was like a sharp, golden crescent moon or a ferocious heavenly dragon. The golden void lightning faltered upon striking Feng Wuya's fist, as if it were clashing violently with some kind of power. Even its shape was warped, and it was showing signs of crumbling. Feng Wuya was ecstatic to see this. However, before he had a chance to celebrate, his fist was pulverized by the bolt of lightning. No! He roared as his body was engulfed by boundless golden void lightning. The barrier around the heavenly Tao fragment was shattered, and the lotus of life and death also had a massive gash sliced into its body as destructive lightning wreaked havoc throughout its entire body. The golden void lightning exploded, creating a series of cracks in the immortal slaying platform. Feng Wuya's entire body was charred black, and his mouth gaped open with white smoke rising from it. His expression was completely blank, as if he had lost consciousness. His body swayed slightly before falling to the ground with a resounding boom. Enlin's golden void lightning cloak dissipated, and his 3 buff spell techniques were also instantly deactivated. A sense of feebleness washed over his entire body like a tidal wave, and he almost fell to the ground as well. But a strong desire to maintain his poise and bearing overcame his physical difficulties, and he stood firm. Enlin stood proudly on the immortal slaying platform in his flowing white robe, as if he were an invincible war god. Immortal King Feng Wuya lay on the ground, barely breathing. The white-robed, exalted immortal's body grew taller and taller. At the peak of Heavenly Mountain, the place where immortals were killed. Everyone knew that there were billions of living beings on the Divine Source continent, but the one standing at the pinnacle was no longer immortal King Feng Wuya. Instead, it was the graceful white-robed, exalted immortal. Yang Lingxian stared at the white-robed figure in the distance with a dazed expression. The words spoken on the Griffin's house were still vivid in her mind. There were too many twists and turns in this battle, but the result was just as she had hoped. He had really done it. He had really defeated an immortal king who seemed like he could never be defeated. Enlin made his way toward Feng Wuya. Feng Wuya's life force was extremely tenacious. Perhaps this was a special characteristic of his heaven and earth Black Lotus divine Tao. He was like a cockroach, and he was still breathing even after taking so many attacks. You can't kill me, Feng Wuya said. Why? Enlin was amused. I am the most powerful being in this world, and I know many things that you don't. You have no idea what I've sacrificed for this world. Feng Wuya said. An impatient expression appeared on Enlin's face. I don't want to die because I talk too much. I'll give you 10 seconds to explain why I can't kill you. After 10 seconds, my sword is going to fall. Feng Wuya faltered upon hearing this. 10 seconds is, Enlin. 10, 9. Feng Wuya spoke in a panicked voice. The meteorite crashed into the Immortal King Palace and shattered the heavens of the Divine Source continent. I have to use the power of the Heart of the Heavens to repair this world. If I lose the Heart of the Heavens, no one will be able to repair the heavens, and all of the living beings on this continent will be destroyed. Huff, 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 the Immortal King panted heavily with severe injuries. He had spoken so many words in one go that he almost couldn't catch his breath. Enlin was no longer counting down. He was pondering the Immortal King's words. The meteorite was actually a fragment of the Heavenly Tao. It wasn't impossible that the fragment of the Heavenly Tao had shattered the heavens of this world. After all, that meteorite was a fragment of the Heavenly Tao of the Tai Chu continent. You say you can't repair this world? Enlin was still perplexed. Of course. My divine Tao has the ability to communicate with heaven and earth, and the Heart of the Heavens only recognizes me. None of the 6 Kunlun divine generals or the elders have the ability to control the Heart of the Heavens. Only I can use the Heart of the Heavens to repair this world. Feng Wuya smiled. The place where the heavens were shattered is in the meteorite mystic area. If I die, you can only walk toward destruction along with this world. This world can't do without me. Give me another 10,000 years, and I'll definitely be able to repair this world. Destruction or survival, you choose. Even though Feng Wuya was lying on the ground, he still wore a proud expression. He knew that no one was unafraid of death. This was his final trump card. Let him live, or let everyone die together. To his surprise, an expression of horror appeared on Enlin's face. 10,000 years. It's going to take 10,000 years? Why is it taking so long? Enlin murmured to himself before bursting into laughter. My God! Are you toying with me? Feng Wuya. 10,000 years is too long? You don't have to repair it, so what are you scared of? Feng Wuya could see horror, conflict, and confusion on Enlin's face. Are we talking about the same thing? Why does he feel like there's something wrong with his emotions? What Feng Wuya didn't know was that Enlin was indeed faced with a choice. However, it wasn't a choice between killing Feng Wuya or letting him go so he could continue repairing the heavens. Instead, it was a choice between leaving the heavenly Tao fragment here and allowing the Tai Chu continent to continue toward destruction. Or, it was a choice between taking the heavenly Tao fragment for the future of the Tai Chu continent and leading the divine source continent toward destruction. It was an easy choice, wasn't it? There were countless living beings on the Tai Chu continent, including his friends, family, and loved ones. He was just a passerby on the divine source continent, so he could just take the heavenly Tao fragment to his heart's content. He could think of it as saving the majority of living beings and abandoning a small number of living beings. Enlin unwittingly cast his gaze toward the distance to discover a red figure standing atop a mountain. A faint blush appeared on Yang Lingqian's face upon seeing Enlin, but she still waved her hand with a smile, as if she was very happy for him. A bitter smile appeared on Enlin's face. I'm just a passerby, but aren't the billions of living beings on the divine source continent living beings with flesh and blood? Do they deserve to be destroyed? Enlin was suddenly struck by a sense of despair. Why did this have to happen to him? Why did he have to make a choice? Wasn't this the choice that the heavenly lightning god had made for him back in the heavenly beyond heaven? Chapter 1380. In order to save the majority of people, Enlin ended up killing all of them and enduring the pain of being bitten by all sorts of vengeful ghosts. At that time, the heavenly lightning god had told him that there was no need to save them and that they should just let nature take its course. No matter which side he saved, he would become the villain of the other side. This was a very vicious statement, but it reflected the reality of the situation. No matter what Enlin chose, he would always be wrong. No matter what he did, he would always be an executioner who had the blood of countless living beings on his hands. Why? Why do I have to endure all of this? Enlin looked up into the sky with an enraged expression. Before he knew it, his eyes had already become bloodshot with indignation and despair. Feng Wuya stared at Enlin with a blank expression. Do you really want to kill me that badly? He thought that Enlin wanted to kill him but couldn't, so he was forced to tears. Enlin had never thought about abandoning this responsibility. He didn't want the Tai Chu continent to be destroyed, nor did he want the divine source continent to be destroyed. He wanted to find a way to satisfy both sides. Just as he was about to be forced to the brink of collapse, the evil-slaying sword on his back suddenly lit up. A cold yet tender voice sounded. Hey idiot, it's just mending the sky. Have you forgotten how I mended the sky in the ancient Tai Chu dragon realm? Enlin shuddered before an expression of ecstasy appeared on his face. Little Xie, you're saying you can mend the sky? The sky of the divine source continent was only blasted open by brute force. It's not like the heavenly Tao has collapsed, so why can't I mend it? Little Xie asked calmly. Her voice was filled with peerless confidence. What are you guys talking about? Feng Wuya's eyes widened. I'm going to save both the divine source continent and the Tai Chu continent. Enlin chortled with glee. Feng Wuya, what? Splat. A sword plunged into Feng Wuya's chest. Feng Wuya. His eyes widened as he stared blankly at the sword in his chest with incredulity etched on his face. Do you want to die? Feng Wuya roared at the top of his lungs. He had never imagined that he would be stabbed to death by Enlin's sword. If he died, who would save the divine source continent from destruction? I forgot to tell you, my sword spirit can also mend the sky, so you won't need it. Besides, Enlin pointed at the blue barrier around the immortal beheading platform, I've already used up all my energy, and I can't break the immortal beheading platform's array. If I don't kill you, I won't be able to get out. Feng Wuya. It seemed to make sense. Do you have any last words? Enlin asked. However, he was still quite impressed by Feng Wuya's combat prowess. As the first Tao integration stage super mighty figure to be defeated by him, he had to give the loser some benefit. Feng Wuya could feel the evil-slaying sword in his heart devouring his life essence relentlessly, and a wry smile appeared on his face. Everyone only knows that I'm a bloodthirsty and violent person, but they don't know the sacrifices I've made for the entire world. Are you saying these last words to disgust me? Anlin asked. Feng Wuya heaved a forlorn sigh. Do you know that the heart of the heavens actually has an attribute? It's a yin attribute that represents the darkness of the world. It's exactly because of this that it's compatible with my heaven and earth black lotus, and can borrow its power to aid me. Back when I obtained the heart of the heavens, my power of yang was suppressed and devoured by the heart of the heavens. Cough cough. Feng Wuya coughed up a few more mouthfuls of blood as he spoke, and his aura was extremely feeble. So? Anlin asked. He really didn't understand why Feng Wuya's last words were so strange. It was a long string of strange words, but he seemed to be taking it very seriously. Do you know where the core of a person's power of yang is located? It's my kidney. It's my little dick. A look of grief and indignation appeared on Feng Wuya's face. I'm not really impotent, it's just that my dick has been suppressed by the heart of the heavens. Anlin was astonished. Feng Wuya was still speaking with an excited expression on his face. In order to save the entire continent from destruction, even if I had to lose my dignity as a man, I still had to use the heart of the heavens to mend the heavens. If it weren't for my sacrifice, you wouldn't even have a chance to stand here and fight me. You would have been destroyed along with the entire continent. All right, I understand. Anlin massaged his brows. I'll explain to everyone that you're impotent for the sake of the entire continent. I'm not impotent, I've been suppressed. Cough cough. Feng Wuya threw up a few more mouthfuls of blood as his blood boiled. I'm quite curious about one thing. If you're impotent, then why are you still recruiting all the beauties in the world to join your harem? Anlin was perplexed. Hee. Feng Wuya chuckled with a meaningful expression. I can't have sex with those peerless beauties, so why can others? I'm not going to give them a chance. Anlin's mouth gaped open in shock again. At this moment, the evil-slaying sword in Feng Wuya's chest glowed with a scintillating divine light imbued with the power of annihilation, instantly pulverizing Feng Wuya's body. How disgusting, little Xie said in a cold voice. Anlin didn't even get a chance to do anything before little Xie delivered the final blow. She clearly couldn't take this any longer. Anlin heaved a resigned sigh upon seeing this. Not taking into account anything else, just these last words alone were the most outlandish last words he had ever heard. However, seeing as Feng Wuya was so insistent, Anlin could still do his best to clarify his impotence. A burst of invisible power seemed to float into the sky. The blue barrier around the immortal slaying platform disappeared. In the sky above, black lotus petals suddenly floated down, covering a radius of 1,000 miles. It was both beautiful and desolate. At the same time, an extremely dense origin chi surged in the void, causing the cultivation of countless creatures to increase by a large margin. Some even comprehended the concept, seemingly comprehending something. A Tao integration stage mighty figure had fallen. Heaven and earth mourned for the death of a Tao integration stage mighty figure. Immortal King Feng Wuya really had died this time. Even though most of the 1 million cultivators here wanted nothing more than for the immortal king to die, they were still struck by a sense of grief upon seeing this. Perhaps these 1,000-kilometer lotus flower petals and the remnant Tao realm true intent were his final gift to the world, at the place where Feng Wuya's body had disappeared. An incorporeal crystal floated in the air, constantly changing its shape. At times, it seemed to have a physical form, and at other times, it disappeared into thin air, as if it had never existed. Anlin was a little curious, and he made a grabbing motion toward the crystal, only to find that his hand had passed through it, as if it were nothing more than air. What's going on? He was a little perplexed, and he made a few more grabbing attempts, only to find nothing. "Humph. So you're not accepting me?" Lin harumphed coldly. "Even that impotent Feng Wuya accepted you, but you're not accepting me? Wait, didn't Feng Wuya only become impotent after being accepted by the heavenly Tao fragment?" Lin's heart jolted with shock, and he took a couple of steps back before heaving a sigh of relief with lingering fear in his heart. "My God, thank God the heavenly Tao fragment didn't accept me. If it did, then what would I do if I became impotent?" Lin was secretly celebrating his good fortune. "So be it. I'll just let Ishi take the heavenly Tao fragment. His master wanted it anyway, so he should take it back as his disciple." Chapter 1381. Lin was conflicted over what to do with the heavenly Tao fragment. Over 1,000,000 cultivators had just witnessed the fall of the immortal king, and they were all sighing with emotion. They had also seen the heavenly Tao fragment, but none of them dared to look at it. After all, it belonged to the new most powerful being on the divine source continent, the white-robed exalted immortal Lin. The 6 Kunlun divine generals were filled with grief and incredulity. They looked up at the black lotus flower petals raining down from the sky, and they felt as if the immortal king were bidding farewell to them. Yanji opened her hand to catch the falling flower petals, but the flower petals simply passed through her hand like a mirage. A hint of melancholy appeared on her flawless features. The era of immortal King Feng Wuya has come to an end. The river god wiped tears from his eyes. "Wah! Big brother immortal king has always been invincible in my heart. How could he have lost?" Xinglong gripped his spear tightly. "The white-robed exalted immortal has just been through a battle, and he's at his weakest. We can take this opportunity to kill him." Xinglong's words caused the expressions of the other 5 divine generals to change. However, they hesitated as they looked at the figure standing proudly on the immortal slaying platform. Lin's invincible form during his previous battle had already left them in awe. "He's indeed feeble, but a starving camel is still larger than a horse." Poison Flower pointed a finger, and a vibrant violet flower blossomed on her fingertip before quickly wilting away. "I've done some divination, and if all 6 of us attack the white-robed exalted immortal at once, our chances of winning are less than 5%. Why not die to avenge the immortal king?" Wolf Fong bared his fangs as he glowered at the white-robed figure with a ferocious expression. Gui Ting shook his withered tree trunk as he spoke in a hoarse voice. "During this battle on the immortal slaying platform, both the immortal king and the white-robed exalted immortal displayed power that was far beyond our imagination. If this were in the past, I would have been confident that we could kill him together, but now—" He didn't even get a chance to finish his sentence, but all of the other divine generals knew what he was thinking. Yanji couldn't help but burst into laughter. "The white-robed exalted immortal is currently within the immortal slaying platform. If we enter one of them, a barrier will appear, and we'll have to fight one-on-one. Attack him together? Are you guys dreaming?" Wolf. Awkward expressions appeared on the faces of all the divine generals. They had said so much, only to be slapped in the face by Yanji. "If you ask me," Yanji said in a seductive voice, "let's hurry up and escape into the depths of the mountains and forests. The world has already changed. If we don't escape now, do you think we'll be able to survive in the future?" Her words finally caused the hearts of the Kunlun god generals to waver once more. "Regardless of whether you leave or not, I'll be taking my leave now. I can't let my 1,000 wives and concubines become widows at such a young age." Yanji chuckled as she drew a circle of flames in the air with her finger, and a spatial gate appeared before her. With Yanji gone, the other 5 divine generals knew that there was no way they could continue fighting. The era of the immortal king, their era, had already come to an end. "Let's go. Our lives are more important. Sai, where there's life, there's life. Everyone, take care." One by one, the divine generals began to bid farewell. At the same time, within the spring light palace of the immortal king palace, Immortal Empress Yen Shuqin was currently playing a battle song on her immortal zither. Her slender and fair fingers quickly plucked the 7 strings of the zither. The sound of the zither was intense, like the raging waves of the sea, and also like the collision of stars. Within the explosion, there was an impassioned feeling. Bam! The sound of something being stretched taut to the extreme erupted before snapping. The strings of the immortal zither snapped, and blood stained the zither red. A series of bloody gashes appeared on Yen Shuqin's slender fingers, which then stained her hands red. A light breeze blew past, and the leaves outside the window rustled. Her white dress fluttered in the wind, and her expression was tinged with a hint of sorrow as she curtsied toward the sky in the distance. Rest in peace, husband. Within the black, square-shaped building, within the meteorite mystic area, Ishi was still unable to find the heavenly Tao fragment. He was a little agitated when he suddenly detected a hint of energy fluctuation from the black lotus at the very center. It seemed to have lost some kind of energy source, and its energy was constantly flowing away. What the hell is this? He circulated the power of his pill before abruptly unleashing a palm toward the black lotus. The black lotus was instantly shattered by the power of his palm. It was extremely fragile after losing its energy source. However, before Ishi had a chance to rejoice, a red pillar of light shot up into the sky from underground, shattering the roof of the black building before shooting straight up into the heavens. Ishi's mouth gaped open in shock. Did I do something wrong? He was shocked to discover that a ghastly rift had appeared in the sky. The destructive power of chaos began to descend upon the world, as if it were going to destroy everything. The earth quaked and space shattered. The immortal King Palace was struck by a calamity, and countless living beings began to flee in all directions. The elders and the Kunlun divine generals, who had just returned to the immortal King Palace, were all dumbstruck by the sight of the sky shattering. They were still in a daze at this apocalyptic scene. Ishi's legs were a little weak. It's over. I think I've stabbed a hole in the sky? On the immortal slaying platform, Anlin had also detected the commotion in the distance. The sky is shattering after the immortal king's death. I don't have time. But if I leave the heavenly Tao fragment here, what if someone else takes it? Anlin was a little distressed. He discovered that the heavenly Tao fragment was completely ignoring him. No matter how hard he tried to grab it, it was as if it didn't exist. Divine inspection technique. The heavenly Tao fragment was a physical manifestation of a flaw in the Tai Chu continent's heavenly Tao. The explanation was very simple. However, Anlin knew that the simpler something was, the more complicated it was. The heavenly Tao fragment was flashing rapidly, as if it had been triggered by the shattering of the heavens. A small white ball appeared at the center of the heavenly Tao fragment. What's this? Anlin was a little curious as he extended a hand toward the ball. It was cold to the touch, and gave him a very comfortable feeling. Furthermore, a peculiar feeling surged through his entire body. It was as if he was holding the entire world in his hand. After Anlin took the ball, the white crystal was still flashing and transforming in the air. This ball wasn't the heavenly Tao fragment, so what was it? Divine inspection technique. The seed of the realm core was a seed born from the heavenly Tao that contained the vitality of the world. It possessed unfathomable power and was known to have the ability to transform or repair the realm core. Anlin was astonished. He seemed to have obtained something extraordinary. The realm core on the Tai Chu continent was complete, but didn't Tina have a fragment of the realm core in her divine mirror world? Could she use this seed of the realm core to transform the fragment of the realm core in her divine mirror world into a complete realm core? Anlin was suddenly filled with anticipation as he stowed the seed into his storage ring. At this moment, the heavenly Tao fragment seemed to have been stimulated and suddenly pounced toward Anlin. Chapter 1382. Anlin's chest was rammed viciously into the heavenly Tao fragment. Thankfully, the force wasn't very strong, and the heavenly Tao fragment was a little feeble. If it had rammed into him with the same force as it had rammed into the heavens of the divine source continent, Unlin would probably have been reduced to dust. "Oh my, you're so heavy. You little baddie." Unlin chuckled with disdain in his eyes. He thought to himself, "What can you do to me with your level of strength?" The white crystal was a little indignant, as if it were a child whose toy had been snatched away. It retreated for a distance, and was just about to unleash another attack on Unlin. However, a thought suddenly occurred to Unlin. "Wait, doesn't that mean you've taken on a physical form?" His eyes lit up, and he immediately unleashed his wings of wind and Kuan Pung travel to instantly appear before the Heavenly Tao fragment. The Heavenly Tao fragment didn't expect Unlin to suddenly attack, and it was unable to evade in time. Immediately afterward, an extremely powerful spatial force swept toward it. The Heavenly Tao fragment was sucked into a supreme-grade storage ring in its physical form. "Phew! I've finally succeeded." Unlin heaved a sigh of relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. He touched his lower body, and thankfully, he could still feel the fragment. Perhaps only after fusing the Heavenly Tao fragment into his body would he be able to experience the same after-effects as Feng Wuya's. Rumble, an earth-shattering ripping sound erupted in the distance. The cracks in the sky had already begun to intensify, and dark chaotic energy was destroying everything around it. The spatial rifts had transformed heaven and earth into a perilous realm. Most of the Immortal King Palace had been reduced to rubble. Several dozen volcanoes around the heavenly mountain began to erupt at the same time, spewing forth scorching lava and poisonous gases, as if blood were gushing forth from the ground. Over 1,000,000 cultivators began to flee for their lives in fear. The doomsday-like scene and the extremely terrifying aura of destruction let them know that this matter was no longer something they could interfere with. Even the return to void stage exalted immortals were horrified. "My God, is this really the end of the world? It's over. If things continue like this, where are we going to run to?" Many cultivators were already in despair. Of course, there were also some experts who looked at the figure on the immortal slaying platform with anticipation. They knew that the white-robed exalted immortal was the only one who could turn this around and bring hope to this world. Unlin pondered for a moment before deciding that there was no time to lose, and he immediately flew toward the Immortal King Palace. The white-robed exalted immortal is on the move again. The place he's going to is the place where the sky broke. In the face of a great calamity, that white robe is still the most dazzling. While the other cultivators chose to flee, the white-robed figure who went against the flow and charged directly towards the Sky Destroyer was extremely dazzling. Yang Lingxian gritted her teeth and followed behind Unlin without any hesitation. Although she didn't know what was the point of following him, she wanted to see Unlin fight. She wanted to see Unlin win the battle. She chased after the white-clothed figure in front of her. However, her cultivation was simply too low. The more she chased, the further she went. The more she chased, the more she couldn't see that silhouette anymore. A massive sense of disappointment welled up in her heart as the figure gradually disappeared from her sight. A stubborn expression appeared on Yang Lingqian's face as she continued to give chase. Within the meteorite mystic region, at the center of the Sky Destroyer, she was using agile movement techniques to evade all types of chaotic energy. "It's over, it's over. What do I do? If things continue like this, countless lives are going to be lost." He evaded the attacks like a ping-pong ball as he spoke with an extremely urgent voice. Right at this moment, a white-robed figure flew through the air. Yanji was just about to flee with all of her beloved concubines when she caught sight of the white figure flying through the air. Yan Shuqin, who was evacuating all of the Spring Light Palace concubines, also caught sight of a determined figure flying toward the center of the Sky Destroyer. At the center of the dark vortex, crimson lightning wreaked havoc as chaotic winds of annihilation swept through the air in a frenzy. The white figure was like a moth flying toward a flame, but it was extremely dazzling, as if it were the only source of light in an apocalyptic world. Countless living beings were rooted to the spot upon seeing this figure. Yang Lingqian's eyes were completely entranced as she stared intently at the man charging into the Sky Destroyer. Her fingers were clasped tightly in front of her chest, and she was extremely nervous as she prayed incessantly. Boom, 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 countless chaotic winds of annihilation swept toward Enlin. The crimson lightning was like an apocalyptic demon as it pounced toward Enlin in an extremely menacing manner. The terrifying might and sense of pressure it exuded could easily pulverize a return-to-void stage mighty figure into dust. Enlin made a series of hand seals before drawing the evil-slaying sword from his back and slashing it down. An inky black sword intent pierced through the sky, repelling all of the wind and lightning. Go! Enlin raised his evil-slaying sword with a single hand and stabbed it toward the hole in the sky. A divine light erupted forth for over 500 kilometers, enshrouding heaven and earth. Whoosh! An invisible ripple proliferated throughout heaven and earth. Everything seemed to have come to a standstill. Regardless of whether it was the surging wind and clouds or the devastating lightning, everything was as still as a painting. Only the evil-slaying sword emanated the purest inky black light, which extended outward to fill the hole in the sky. Immediately afterward, it was as if time had been reversed, and the rift began to contract as destructive power began to pour into the heavens. Everyone was completely entranced by this scene. The dark clouds slowly dissipated, and the sun began to shine down upon the earth. Everything became tranquil and tranquil. Only one person remained standing in the sky. His white robe danced around him, and his features were as exquisite as jade. On this day, countless people would never be able to forget this figure. My God! Am I witnessing a divine miracle? The white-robed exalted immortal slaying an immortal king on the immortal slaying platform was already astonishing enough, but now, he's mending the heavens as well. Is there anything he can't do? He's the savior of the world. He's saved all of us. The white-robed exalted immortal, Enlin, is a living legend. He's the epitome of invincibility. Countless cultivators who witnessed all of this spoke excitedly, their hearts filled with admiration. Yan Shuqin looked up into the sky with a pleasant smile on her face. This world is about to usher in a new era after being reborn from destruction. The new master of this world doesn't seem to be too bad. The shattered sky had been repaired, but not only was little Xie not exhausted, she was even more excited, as if she really enjoyed doing this. She looked like she was going to die if she wasn't given any work to do. Enlin was a little exasperated as he silently sheathed his sword. The probability of the sky shattering was extremely low, so where was he going to find another shattered world for little Xie to repair? Speaking of which, he had been to other worlds recently, and he had encountered many shattered worlds. First was the ancient Tai Chu dragon realm, then the divine source continent. Was he going to become a world-demolishing monster? Enlin. A gentle voice sounded from behind him. Enlin turned around to discover an exquisitely beautiful woman in a red dress. Her skin was as fair as snow, and she was looking at him with a vibrant smile. Oh, it's Yang Lingqian. How was it? Was I handsome just then? Enlin asked with a smile. Yang Lingqian was a little embarrassed, and a seductive blush appeared on her face as she nodded. You were very handsome. You were handsome from head to toe. This time, she wasn't giving a perfunctory reply. Instead, she was speaking from the bottom of her heart. She raised her head and looked directly at Enlin, as if she had mustered up her courage. And you were so handsome that I couldn't take my eyes off you. Enlin faltered slightly upon hearing this. He was a little embarrassed by this compliment. He looked into her eyes, and he felt as if he could see some kind of emotion hidden within her scorching gaze. Ha ha! Enlin patted the woman's head with a smile. Let's go. It's time to collect some spoils of war. Collect spoils of war. Yang Lingxian came to her senses and asked with a blush on her face. Lin waved the Immortal King's storage ring in his hand. There aren't any treasures in here. The Immortal King Palace must have hidden treasures somewhere. I have to calculate the spoils of war. Chapter 1383. Loot? Are you going to confiscate the loot? Yang Lingxian asked. That's right, I'm going to confiscate it. Lin chuckled. Yang Lingxian couldn't help but burst into laughter. You're such a straightforward savior. The two of them descended from the sky. None of the cultivators who had yet to escape from the Immortal King Palace dared to stop them. The white-robed exalted immortal is here. Run. Who's that female immortal? They seem to be quite close. Could she be the white-robed exalted immortal's Tao partner? Some of the concubines looked at the two figures in the distance with heartache. Yang Lingxian didn't know what kind of stir Lin's patting of her head would create across the entire Divine Source continent and change her status. Lin landed in the meteorite mystic area and was immediately greeted by a round hug. Alchemy Patriarch, your performance just then was so mesmerizing. Your stature is so majestic and reliable that I can no longer use words to express my admiration for you. She was extremely excited. Lin's expression darkened. So you're using your unique hug to express your emotions? Ishi's body was like a ball, and his stomach was propped up against Lin's body, so he couldn't hug Lin at all. As such, he could only extend his arms to form a water snake hug. Meanwhile, Lin was also hugging Ishi as if he were hugging a ball, and it was a very strange feeling. Yang Lingxian couldn't help but burst into laughter upon seeing Lin's reaction. Even though these two exalted immortals were a little strange, they were both extremely powerful. Outside the meteorite mystic area, there were still 3 top-rate elders and the Immortal King Envoy lying on the ground with severe injuries. They had most likely been crippled by the round fatso, and they were still recovering from their injuries. Lin made his way over to Grand Elder Fu Haotsong. Where is the Immortal King Palace's storage? Tell me the truth, and I can spare your life. I won't betray the Immortal King even if I die. Fu Haotsong roared. Bam! Lin slapped his palm toward Fu Haotsong, reducing him to dust. The other 3 top-notch exalted immortals were dumbfounded by what they saw. The great elder Fu Haotsong, who had shaken the entire continent, had suddenly died. The impact on their minds was not small. Lin wasn't going to show any mercy to someone like this. Fu Haotsong was Feng Wuya's most loyal subordinate, and he was also the man who had committed the most crimes, so he had to die. Lin then turned to second elder Wang Chun and asked, Do you know where the Immortal King Palace keeps its treasures? The more detailed you are, the less severe your punishment will be. On the contrary, he glanced at Sun Biu and Luoyen, the more silent you are, don't blame me for being ruthless. The 3 of them trembled at the same time. They knew that Lin was not joking. I know where the treasure vault of the Immortal King Palace is, Wang Chen urged. I also know where Feng Wuya's personal treasure vault is. Sun Biu blushed. Wang Chen and Luoyen both turned to the female elder beside them with peculiar expressions. White-robed exalted immortal, I know where the Immortal King ambassadors are looking for treasures. The leader of the Immortal King ambassadors also chimed in. Lin was a little surprised. He didn't think that all 3 of them would choose to give in. Actually, his invincible battle prowess and the great elder's straightforward death had long since caused the 3 of them to completely lose the will to resist. They only had 2 choices now. The first was to surrender, and the second was to go underground with Feng Wuya. The vast majority of them would choose to surrender. After all, Feng Wuya wasn't a master who was worthy of their loyalty. He had only been able to conquer them with his absolute power. Now, Feng Wuya's only strength had been surpassed by Lin, so how could they go underground with Feng Wuya? After just a single day, the remaining forces of the Immortal King Palace either fled or surrendered. Lin stood in front of the treasure vault of the Immortal King Palace and slowly pushed open the enchantment barrier. Lin instantly felt as if he were going to be blinded by a blinding light. Countless spirit stones, vital stones, spirit pills, miraculous medicines, powerful weapons, and all types of exotic treasures were piled up like mountains. However, they weren't piled up randomly. Instead, there was a mountain of spirit stones, a mountain of spirit pills, a mountain of magic tools, and a mountain of spirit tools. They were distributed in an extremely orderly fashion. Wang Chun explained, "This is where the Immortal King gathers all of the resources on the Divine Source continent." Lin's eyes widened. "All of this is mine?" Wang Chun replied in a respectful manner, "You're now the master of the Immortal King Palace, so you have the absolute right to distribute these resources." Even though he said this, he was grumbling internally. "You're the most bad *SS on the entire continent right now, so how could I say that all of these resources are mine?" Yang Lingqian was also dumbstruck. She could swear that she had never seen so many treasures in her life. Lin smiled. "Ishi, let's talk about how we're going to distribute these treasures first." Ishi splayed his hands open with a nonchalant expression. "My goal here is to bring the Heavenly Tao fragment to master. Everything else doesn't matter to me. Besides, I didn't really contribute much during the final battle. You killed Immortal King Fengwuya and repaired the shattered heavens. You can take all of these treasures, I don't want them." Lin turned to Ishi with a hint of surprise on his face. Ishi's indifferent attitude toward fame and fortune had once again changed Lin's impression of him. Even though Ishi said that he didn't need them, Lin still insisted on giving him some things. They had fought and risked their lives together, so even if they didn't contribute much, they had still put in a lot of effort. Ishi was unable to dissuade Lin's insistence, so he accepted all of the spirit pills. He needed these spirit pills for his alchemy cultivation. On top of that, Ishi had taken 3,600 spirit pills from the Immortal King Palace's treasure vault. That's right, it was that extravagant. There were a total of 3,600 extremely precious spirit pills. The rest all belonged to Lin. Lin swept the treasure vault clean. Immediately afterward, he began to look at the items in his storage ring, and his face became flushed as his breathing accelerated. Lin, who had always prided himself on being a tycoon in the Taichu continent, was completely blinded by his wealth. He had obtained a total of 850 million spirit stones. Just this alone was enough to make Lin almost stop breathing from excitement. Spirit tools, 650. Spirit rank treasures, 1,600. There were over 10,000 rare treasures and magic tools in total. Lin was already at a complete loss for words at the sight of this terrifying wealth. However, thinking about it, it made sense. One had to realize that Immortal King Fengwuya had done everything in his power to exploit the wealth of all of the major empires. Even though the treasures on the Divine Source continent were inferior to those on the Taichu continent, the combined wealth was still extremely astonishing. The treasures are indeed astonishing, but why isn't there even a single immortal rank treasure? Lin was still a little perplexed. One had to realize that even though the Divine Source continent wasn't very powerful, there should still be a lot of immortal rank treasures. White-robed exalted immortal, all of the best treasures are in Fengwuya's personal treasure vault. I'll take you there. Sunbiu made her way over and bowed with a shy expression. Lin's body shuddered,